I don't know how you say that in Polish, so sorry if that's wrong.
Would it be so bad if an 84-year-old got into heroin?
Welcome to the Cat Organizational Podcast.
You idiot. It's written down in front of you idiot.
This is like the buffalo chicken wrap of answers.
I haven't heard about hot orcs in a while.
We were so horny for motion controls in 2005.
I can't wait to come back and tell you how it was Noah's Ark, you asshole.
I would also like to retroactively say I've never had cotton candy acid.
So Andrew's 100% doing a voice, right?
Everybody get off IMDb now. Time to record.
This episode and probably this whole podcast is a mistake.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Debate This, the show where no one is right, but someone is definitely wrong. In this podcast, we take time out of our busy adult lives to talk about comics, video games, and how, much like Old Town Road before it, it is impossible to find a remix of Toss a Coin to Your Witcher that does not fuck.
How long into this episode do we go before we all start singing Toss a Coin to Your Witcher? Because that song is the best song.
Well, if Kyle did it right, that was the intro to this episode.
Yeah, it's trailing off right now.
Yeah.
Good.
It's so fucking good. I love it. I love everything about the Netflix show.
Now there's expectations for Kyle to get that right, because if not, oof.
Even Kyle told himself to do it right.
Yep.
If you're not hearing it now, then everybody listening needs to go on YouTube and just search for Toss a Coin remix, and it'll do just the same trick. All right. So speaking of the Netflix show, have y'all seen the Netflix show?
Hell fucking yeah, man. I love it. I'm so hooked.
That's right.
I injected it straight into my eyes.
I have one episode left because I'm a scrub.
Oh. Well, I'm gonna spoil that for you.
That's fine.
It's so good. It's so good, you guys. When we this was first announced a couple years ago, I think the entire community was kind of on pins and needles and like, will it be?
Oh, and it do be.
It do be.
It was right as Game of Thrones was getting bad. And and everyone was like,
that, yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, is this just going to be a Game of Thrones clone? And then they announced that Henry Cavill was going to be Geralt. And in 2020, Henry Cavill is our new God King.
Yeah, he is the hero that show needed.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill is to 2020 as Keanu Reeves was to 2019.
Yeah, and it might be again when Cyberpunk comes out, but we'll see.
True.
So for those of you who haven't seen the show out there, back in December, we were all graced with the most recent work performed by, of course, our new God King, Henry Cavill, and that's The Witcher. The Witcher is available on Netflix exclusively. All 8 episodes of Season 1 are available to stream. # not an ad.
Unless Netflix wants it to be an ad. In which case Netflix.
Unless you want it to be an ad.
If Netflix wants to give us money, we will take out that hashtag.
Yes. The Witcher quickly became the biggest hit of the season, surpassing even Baby Yoda himself, and becoming the second most viewed show. I thought this was cool. The second most viewed show in 2019 in Netflix, despite the fact that it only had about 2 weeks to make that to get that data collected.
That is wild. That's so insane.
It's impressive.
What is that saying about Netflix?
Yeah, well, 2019, the year that Stranger Things Season 3 came out.
Right, which was the only which was number 1.
Yeah.
It passed Stranger Things shortly after 2020 started. The headline came out pretty quickly, like, now biggest show.
Now with a hit TV series under its belt, they already either started filming Season 2 or they just announced when they're going to start filming it. I mean, it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, they just posted a video, or Henry Cavill posted a video on The Witcher's Twitter account that they were about to start filming Season 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this episode comes out, they have started filming.
So I don't think it's that bold to say the Witcher franchise is the first franchise to have so successfully penetrated all of books, TV, and video games. And when you think about it, plenty of series have tried, but I mean, not even Star Wars can say that they have successful entries in all 3 of those mediums.
You're trying to start a fight with some Star Wars fans.
I mean, go ahead and at me, Star Wars fans. Like, what do you got? Shadows of the Empire?
I don't know.
Battlegrounds?
Episode 1 Pod Racer kind of fucks.
I mean, KOTOR's good, but KOTOR is not KOTOR's extended canon and was made by a third party. I don't know. I don't really count KOTOR.
That exists in its own vacuum.
It is kind of its own pocket dimension. Anyway, so to commemorate the success of Netflix show, I decided that it was time to be that insufferable friend who leans over to you in the movie theater and whispers how this is so different from what happens in the books, because I'm the guy who read the books. I read the books. And there's a lot of stuff in the Netflix show that doesn't happen in the books and happens differently in the books. So I'm going to tell you about it.
Everybody has one. Everybody has that friend.
And all of our friend is Andrew.
That's right. But just like our hero Geralt of Rivia, everyone needs some good traveling companions. So I've enlisted Matt, the Butcher of Blaviken, Cole, Todd, 14th of the Hill, Thomas, and Kyle, the White Flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies, Harper, to come with me on this wonderful and pedantic journey.
I don't know what that means, but I'm all about it.
That was Kyle's party name in college.
Yes.
So boys, drink your potions and sharpen your silver swords, because it's time to delve into the world of The Witcher.
I also don't know, for the record, what 14th of the Hill is.
Okay, so those are aliases used in
Yeah.
different characters. So Butcher of Blaviken, everybody knows what that one is, right?
Yeah, I got the one we all know.
I say that we get to hear all about that. Watch it.
That was the gimme. 14th of the Hill refers to Triss Marigold.
Nice. Hell yeah, Triss.
Cool.
Yeah, because I know Todd is hashtag Team Triss, which we'll tell you about why you're wrong. That's because it's not up for debate.
I mean, I chose Yennefer in the game. I just think Triss is metal in the game. She has her fingernails ripped off.
She does kick ass in the game. She has she had some really good parts in the game and in the earlier games too. And then this one is a little bit of a pool, but I think this is my favorite. Everybody has like weird aliases, kind of like Game of Thrones. Like first of his name, Mother of Dragons. Like everyone has real
Has, like, 8
Renaissance
names.
era names like this. But this is the best one. The White Flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies is one of the names for Emperor Emir von Var Emreis of the Nilfgaard Empire.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who that is.
Well, he's a very important character, and we're going to learn about him very soon.
I can't wait.
Like I was saying before this recording, for those of you that were like me and joined in on Witcher 3, you just got like elevator pitches of all the characters you didn't know that were super, super important. So I would still be going to the end of the game. I'm like, Nilfgaard. Who? Okay, that's fine. Like, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into the actual series, I think it's good just to be super clear on what the series actually is. So what all we're going to talk about. So overall, when you talk about The Witcher, it constitutes a total of 8 books and then 3 full-length games that came after. So let's put a pin in the games for now. So just for the books, the way that these books were written it's kind of interesting. I don't know of anything else that does this, but there is a very solid beginning to end story arc, but that story arc, that novel series is actually preceded by a series of short stories and anthologies. And these are all based on the original short story just called The Witcher. So it's interesting, and we'll get into it when we get into the individual stories, but a lot of the things in the individual anthologies, the short stories, were kind of created before the overall narrative, and don't really are either not relevant to or almost antithetical or contradict some of the things that happen in this series. So the task that the Netflix show took was interesting, because it's basically the Netflix show, season 1 of the Netflix show is essentially retelling 2 of the 3 anthology books, which are The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. And they're kind of taking all of the relevant stories from both of those anthologies and mishmashing them together to fit a more linear narrative to lead to the novel, the series itself.
So the Netflix show is all stuff that is like part of that less than canon prequel to the novel series?
Yes, more or less, yes.
And it's making it
canon,
cohesive.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because those anthologies, while a lot of them are disconnected stories, it almost feels more to the overall narrative of The Witcher and in the vibe of The Witcher, because The Witcher is a bounty hunter and inherently is episodic, right? It's like Geralt enters a town, looks for a monster, and has misadventures. And the narrative style of the games, and this is why like the game, like making an RPG from this series works so well, because it is by definition episodic, and you can have these very flushed out, isolated stories in the form of like a mission, right? Like you can go to a town and find a bounty and go hunt a monster and deal with all the craziness of the town and leave and never come back, and that's its own isolated story. And that's why this is such an interesting franchise to kind of like take on this new shape. So I mentioned the games. We're not going to talk about the games today. That's probably going to be part 2 or maybe even part 3, depending on how long this goes. Just know that the games are super interesting in of themselves. So the Witcher series was originally Polish. It was published in Poland, and it was published only in Polish for many years. And CD Projekt Red is a Polish developer who adapted the Witcher series into a video game. And at the time, CD Projekt Red had I imagine had always planned to make an English version, but most of the Witcher books were written, but they were only in Polish, and many of them weren't translated. So when CG Projekt Red went to make the first Witcher RPG, they had a lot of the source material, but knew that most of it wouldn't be available to English audiences. So they crafted this story that's basically separate from, but based on the Witcher series. So Witcher 1, the game, takes place several years after any of the books.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And then do 2 and 3 pick up where 1 leaves off?
They do. So the timeline of the books is of at the end. That's your Return or The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. That's your 7, 8, and 9. What's interesting about those is, again, when The Witcher came out, most people in America had only heard of the first book. So the hand-wavy thing that they did in the game was, Geralt loses his memory and doesn't remember anything.
Yep.
So it gave them the ability to use this universe, and it was kind of, they didn't have to introduce anything because you have Geralt, an unreliable narrator. Everybody knows who Geralt is, right? So like Geralt's not meeting anybody, but he just doesn't remember anybody. So he's just like, oh, hey. Yeah, what's up? It's very good.
Everyone gets to reintroduce themselves.
Exactly. So it was like a kind of a shoddy excuse to introduce all these new characters, but it was also kind of worked as a remix. And the biggest thing to come out of this is Triss Merigold. Triss Merigold was written into the first game because at the time the first novel, Blood of Elves, had come out, and Triss has a pretty big part in the Blood of Elves. But Triss is a fairly minor character to the whole franchise. But Triss was written in the game, and because of that, she kind of became this weird kind of sidelined main character when she only appears 2 or 3 times in the actual series. So there's kind of things like that where the game took on more or less new life. And by the end of Game 2, most of the series had come out. So at the end of the second game, Assassins of Kings, Geralt recovers his memory and everything is fine. So then by the beginning of the third game, which came out 5 or 6 months after Lady of the Lake, which is the final book in the series, then they're like, cool, Geralt remembers everything. We're going to actually pick up this story where book 5 left off. So the Wild Hunt is kind of posed in Witcher 3 to be this big bad, but they're only a big bad as noted in the end of book 5. So we'll do another piece about the games. I think the games are super interesting, and if you haven't, anyone who hasn't played them, I highly recommend playing The Witcher 3. I know that's an incredibly hot take. The Witcher 3 in itself is an incredibly cohesive experience. You can play the game without having played 1 and 2. I don't think 1 and 2 hold up very well gameplay wise. They're good. They're fun stories, but
they look terrible.
Witcher 1 looks like ass. Witcher 1 looks like actual ass, and Witcher 2 plays like ass.
And I would say, as someone that didn't play 1 or 2 and didn't read any of the books, you can at least get a pretty good overview through either listening to our podcast or listening to our podcast and then watching a YouTube recap, because I'm sure there's a good one out there.
Exactly.
When did the first Witcher game come out?
Oh, probably 10, 12 years ago. I think 2008.
So PS2 era?
When did the first book come out?
Yeah. Ooh, you're hitting me on dates here. I can do a couple Google. So Witcher the game was 2007.
Okay.
So PS3.
Yeah, so like
let's see,
squarely end of PS2, PS3.
Witcher books were 90s, but they weren't translated until the mid to late 2000s. So for example, Lady of the Lake is the end of the series, and Lady of the Lake was only translated like 4 years ago.
And I'm sorry, what language were they in?
Polish.
Polish, okay.
Yeah. So today we're going to focus mostly on the books, namely the first two anthologies, which season 1 covers, and then we'll start getting into the book or the series of 5 novels, which is considered to be like we'll call that like the Geralt and Ciri saga, basically. So there's one other book that I mentioned. So I mentioned 8. There's 8 books. Counting with my fingers, 8 books. There's the last and final book is called Season of Storms. Now we're not going to talk about Seasons of Storms today. And the reason being, it's absolute filler. It's basically like if this were an anime, it's the OVA that comes out that nobody watches.
Is it the Silmarillion?
Yes, it is the Silmarillion. That would have been a way better comparison that people would understand.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Nerd.
Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien's son collected kind of all his notes.
Oh, okay.
And tried to make it into a book, but it's a anthology / Bible in the world. It's weird. It's only people who are way too into Lord of the Rings enjoy it.
It's the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Got it.
It's the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's a good way.
That's very good. All right, so let's start with some generalities. I want to talk a little bit about the background of this world, and then kind of all the different factions who are at play, some of the major characters, and then we'll get into the individual stories and how those map onto the episodes of the Netflix show. Okay, 3 rules to remember as we go through all this. Rule number 1, probably the most easily like high level description of the vibe of The Witcher is there are no gods and no heroes in this world. This world is very gray, and no one is truly good or evil. I like to think of The Witcher, and the reason why I resonated with it so much is it's kind of a cynical take on Lord of the Rings, and it's not by chance that Kyle compared to Silmarillion to, because there's a lot of comparisons here to Lord of the Rings. Right off the bat, the original author, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Andrzej Sapkowski. I don't know how you say that in Polish, so sorry if that's wrong. He wrote these he wrote these original stories as very cynical takes on ideas like, tropes in modern fantasy, right? So The Witcher, as the easy way to describe it, it's low fantasy, but also kind of dark and cynical fantasy. By that I mean like everyone's an asshole. Everyone kind of sucks. There are no real heroes and villains. Everyone is out for their own purpose, and we don't. And by that extension, we kind of see this world through the eyes of Geralt, who is our primary protagonist. And Geralt has a very particular view of the world, which spins his narration and therefore our view of it. So it's kind of like unreliable narrator a little bit, which is an interesting motif. Rule number 2, Ciri. Ciri is the key to ultimate power and salvation, or salvation. Everybody wants a piece.
Ew.
And then 3, yep.
It's weird.
No, it's not weird because it gets super gross.
Is she the same like age in the books as in the series?
Nope.
Cool. Okay. I'm gonna be I've only watched the series guy, so I'll be those clarifying questions for the next 18 hours.
I'm sorry.
Of Witcher.
She is the same age in the series. That's what she starts. I thought you meant the games, because she's an adult in the 3rd game.
Oh,
yes.
Gotcha. No. In the books.
Yeah.
And I would say,
correct.
and in the 3rd game, everyone gets sexy. No one isn't getting sexy in the 3rd game.
Noted.
Gross.
And that takes us to rule number 3. All mages are assholes.
Yeah.
Don't trust mages. All mages are assholes. Actually, all mages are horny assholes. All mages are just thirsty.
Got
That's
it.
fair.
I have a clarifying question for your first rule. You said there are no gods and no heroes. Are there no gods in this world, or was that just an expression
correct.
you used?
No,
That's
legit. Yeah,
There are
so
no deities in this world.
there are no deities. There's no god of the whatever. There are people that there are deities that people pray to, but it's not like D&D where they're actual tangible spirits. It's
Gotcha.
just it's as realistic of a world that can also have fantasy and dwarves and elves in it.
Sure.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the kind of the creation myth that created this world. Before humanity, there were only the elves. So again, in this world, this is a world where elves and dwarves live among humans, among gnomes, and other fantastical creatures. But before humanity, we have the elves. The elves were the first people of this world. They tamed the lands. They built great cities. You know, the etc. Your general like first people's stories. These are very much Lord of the Rings style, pointy ears, tall, long lifespans, very, very pompous, very, very, very slow to act, things like that. But specifically, no affinity to magic. So there's no magic in this world. And then we have the conjunction of the spheres. The conjunction of the spheres was a global cataclysm that essentially merged a number of worlds together, bringing in humans and dwarves and gnomes, but also monsters and other creatures and intelligent and unintelligent creatures alike. It's basically your hand-wavy explanation why this is a D&D world.
Got it.
Interesting. That's neat. I did not know that.
Yeah. The other thing about the conjunction was it birthed chaos energy. And as metal as that sounds, chaos energy is basically from what derives all of the fantastical properties in this world. So monsters are possible because of chaos. Magic is possible because of chaos. People that wield magic, now humans were able to rise up because they were able to harness this chaos into magic.
So like you get the 7 emeralds and then your hair turns yellow and you can fly. Chaos.
More like you can collect the life juice of everyone around you and hull a giant spirit bomb.
Got it. Okay, so more Dragon Ball Z, less Sonic.
Yeah. So enter humans. So humans do as they do in every fantastical piece of fiction, which
Ruin
is
it.
Wipe shit on everything. And humans conquered the elves, nearly making them extinct. And humanity then built their castles and cities on top of the ruins of the conquered elvish people.
That tracks. Sounds like us.
Couldn't have just like been diplomatic and been like, "Hey, we're gonna stay over here. It's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll trade you some of our like tea leaves and mayo."
That's not human nature, Todd.
We did what we do best.
Ugh.
So I would say there are 4 primary main characters here that are integral to the entire story. There are a lot of characters, obviously there are a ton of characters that are in and out, but there are 4 characters that really, really matter from whose we get some level of perspective. And of course, the most important, we've got Geralt of Rivia.
The White Wolf.
The White Wolf, the Butcher of Blaviken, Gwynblade, which is the Elvish tongue for White Wolf, and he's got about 17 other aliases. Mm-hmm. Geralt of Rivia is a Witcher, and the titular Witcher of this series.
The titular Witcher.
The titular Witcher.
Which is
going to be the title of this episode.
That is the word titular used in 2 debate this episodes in a row, if anybody's keeping track.
That is an ad for the word titular.
Toss a coin to your titular Witchular.
There it is.
Oh, damn it.
All right, that's enough of that. It's dead.
So most of these stories, especially the first 2 books, are told from Geralt's perspective. And that's important to remember because when we go through, again, incredibly important in these anthologies, we only know what Geralt knows. We know, we don't know anything else. So this is not told from a third-person narrative. This is, Geralt did this, Geralt knows this, Geralt heard about this.
Is it written in first person or third person?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Mostly third person, but the way stories are told is very sporadic. Like
sure.
every book has a new kind of different way to recount a tale. Because another element here is the fact that this is like before recorded history, so there aren't records. So we find we're getting fragmented information found in the archives, or like this song from a bard. We'll get there. So
Yeah.
it's neat how they do it, but it's also very confusing when you're reading it.
Got it.
Because nothing can be easy.
No, nothing can be easy. Geralt is a witcher, which is a traveling monster hunter. Geralt goes from town to town killing monsters for money. He will, and that's his profession. Because of the conjunction of spheres, there are monsters. Because of magic and because of, the way that this world works, he has the powers and ability to fight those monsters, and he does so as a living. But Geralt, as a witcher, is an enhanced human. He is essentially a mutant, and the show does a really good job of flagging that literally like 10 seconds in, because he drinks a potion and his eyes turn all black and his skin goes absolutely pale white.
It's so good.
It's very
the
it's
animation for
good.
him, like the results of him consuming deductions. That's what they're called, right?
I don't know. Just say potions.
I think at least the third one calls them deductions. Now I need to know. Pause the podcast.
While Todd looks that up, I have a question as to the nature.
Decoctions. Yeah, there you go.
That word is never used outside of the games.
Oh, well.
The nature of his mutation. A few questions.
Yeah.
Was he born a witcher, or was he...
No one is born a witcher.
It was the Spartan program, Kyle. He
Thank
was
you,
made
Todd.
like a Spartan.
So actually, that's a really good segue. So the Witchers are basically one of our very many factions. The Witchers are this kind of independent, neutral band of monster hunters, traveling adventurers. Basically, this is like your D&D adventurers guild, right? These guys are superhuman people with abilities that surpass most normal villagers and peasants, and they go from town to town finding adventure, hunting monsters. But again, remember, this is a cynical take on high fantasy. So Geralt, as a witcher, is a mutant. He's a monster. He is a monster hunter who most people fear and see as a monster himself. Geralt's abilities are because of his training, but two, an event called the Trial of the Grasses, which is a ritual that is done by the Witchers in a very young age, where they're basically infused with a series of toxins, potions, poisons, and other magical properties to be able to withstand. It's basically a super soldier serum.
Okay.
So it's not unlike how they made Wolverine.
Okay.
It's very grisly, very brutal process.
I stand by my comparison to the
Spartan.
Spartan program.
Mm-hmm.
I that makes sense. I have some follow-up questions. Is this something... Do you choose to be a Witcher, or are you drafted in a sense?
Short answer, no. Long answer, we're going to get there. Great question.
Can anyone go through this trial, or is there like...
Anyone can go through it, but few people actually succeed.
Sure.
So the whole deal is a lot of people die. I mean, imagine this is just a group of traveling murder hobos who strap young boys to a table and inject them full of poisons until they reach near death.
Until they don't die.
And that's a thing, too, that only men can become witchers.
Correct. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of fear around the Witcher school, and generally in this world, we're kind of coming on the back half of the bell curve of Witchers kind of being a thing. So Witchers are already starting to become a little extinct. Humanity has now conquered everywhere in this massive continent. So there's not a lot of like unconquered or still like untamed lands. So there just aren't a lot of monsters left, which means there's less of a need for Witchers. So combine that with the fact that Witchers are pretty rare, and most people I've only heard about them in like fables, like poor dirty grimy peasants telling their kids like, be nice or the Witchers are going to come and take you. It's that kind of thing.
Got it.
So they see them as mutants.
Can you give us your grimy villager voice?
We're going to get plenty of grimy villagers. If you want more grimy villagers, you should check out our episode that we did a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Geralt. Most people also assume or think that Witchers cannot feel. which Geralt definitely leans into with his personality. His exterior is very much like brash and cold and unfeeling, and there's a lot of grunts and ugh. But deep down, Geralt's actually an incredibly empathetic person, a very intelligent person, and just really just does not give a shit about people. like he's kind of like he barely considers himself a human, or at least like he's a human, but like he is very detached from the politics of man, and he could give a shit about kingdoms and kings and territories and all that. He just wants to make money and chill.
He's here to hunt monsters and cash out.
So then we've got Princess Cirilla, or otherwise known as Ciri. Fiona Ellen Rhiannon. She's got 3 last names.
That's a lot of
she's
names.
royalty.
Good. Too many names. What you doing hogging all those names?
She's got 4 names because she's royalty. Ciri is going to be your other primary protagonist of this series. Now, we're not going to get a lot from her in the early anthologies. She is definitely the main focus of the 5-book series, and most of the story is actually told from Ciri's journey. About half of it doesn't even involve Geralt at all.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah. I never would have guessed.
It's constantly amazing to me how little Geralt is actually involved in the back half of these novels.
I feel like there's something else, another book that does that, but I can't place it, and I don't need to waste our time with it. But it's not unheard of.
So Ciri, like I said, she's your other main protagonist. She is the princess and heir to Sintra. Sintra is one of the kingdoms of man, which we'll discuss here in just a bit. Ciri is also revealed to be a source, which is basically an incredibly strong font of magical power. Now, this is different than just being magically having magical aptitude. She is kind of like an actual like a source from which you would draw magic, rather than someone who can just like attune to magic.
Question.
Yes.
Is she a serif or sans serif font?
I don't. What? What?
You said she was a font of magic, and I'm asking is she a serif or sans serif font?
She's definitely a sans serif font.
All right, got it.
I hated that whole joke.
Matt's the worst. We all can agree. Matt's just terrible.
That joke was there for somebody. Somebody laughed.
All the comm majors loved that.
Everyone, you can't hear it, but everyone's clapping.
Yep. So Ciri's magical power is due to her lineage. Ciri's got the elder blood. It's basically because she's a direct descendant of the first peoples, that first series of elves that were basically wiped out from existence. And then, there's a lot of things that she's called. Some call her the Child of Surprise. She's also called the Lion Cub of Sintra. She's also got a lot of names.
Sure.
She is bound to Geralt by destiny. And that sounds really cheesy, but it'll make sense as we get through it.
Destiny came up a lot in the show, and
Destiny comes up an exorbitant amount.
Yep.
And it was one of those things that is like, is it? I mean, I think it's the whole show is like, is Destiny real, or is it something people talk about? And
I mean, for a world with no gods, there is a lot of talk about Destiny.
Yep, and that is to read The Witcher is literally to go through a philosophy 101 class. There's an impressive amount of just narrative arguing morals and arguing decisions that have really no right answer. And that's, again, like not to shed so much praise on the games, but I think The Witcher 3 has gotten a lot of praise for the way that it makes you make decisions that are morally gray. Mm-hmm. But it does that because it really is the overall vibe and the theme behind the Witcher series. It's this world is not black and white. There's really not any one right answer. You as a person just have to do what you think is best.
And again, the whole first episode sets that up great.
The lesser evil.
There are no lesser evils,
And over and over again, like my perspective is the game, over and over again, like even when you think you're making the best choice, it always comes with like a large side of bad.
Yep.
Like
there's always a price.
Yep.
Yeah, you there are so few times that you're like, wow, I went in as the good guy and I left as the still very good guy. Like very few times you get to like walk out feeling just great about everything.
Yeah, there is never a save the baby or throw the baby in the river moment.
Yeah. if you save the baby, it's only because you handed it off to the parent who then threw it in the river.
Yeah, exactly. the other greasy peasant who threw it in the river.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have our third primary protagonist, if so to speak, which is Yennefer of Vengerberg. Yennefer is considered to be one of the most powerful and also unpredictable sorceresses in current time. She is eternally bound to Geralt. They have a very complicated relationship. They are bound to each other by a very specific reason, which we'll discuss here in a little bit. And she's a very mysterious character. She, again, another situation of like, we only know what Geralt knows. Much of Yennefer's background is mysterious to Geralt. Geralt knows that she's much, much older than he is because of the way magic works, and sorceresses just live a very long time. Geralt speculates about her background, but never asks, and just kind of like makes assumptions. We don't know much about her when she's introduced in the anthologies. Geralt makes a passing remark that says he assumes that, he can kind of tell from her mannerisms that she was a hunchback before she became a sorceress,
which is a weird conclusion to get drawn to.
Which is a weird thing to infer, but we learn later about the world of sorceresses why that isn't super weird. We know that mostly sorceresses and sorcerers, for that matter, are much older than they appear. They use heavy illusion magic to alter their appearance. So Geralt says, like, by the way she walks, by the way she like carries herself, he imagines or whatever. That's important to know as it relates to Yennefer in the show, which is probably the biggest difference between show and book, is how they handled Yennefer's character.
Huh. Interesting.
Yennefer, also, you have to understand, is incredibly cold and unfeeling. She is manipulative. She is unpredictable. She is not a good person, like, at all. She's not a good person. She is like, if you were to put all these people on D&D alignment charts, she is like chaotic neutral.
Huh. So would you say that, like, in a word, would you say that the show like humanized her in a way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They're definitely trying to make Yennefer a more of a sympathetic hero.
Character. Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean,
which absolutely makes sense. But again, that's why the book is so interesting, because you're seeing everything from Geralt's perspective, and Geralt is an unreliable narrator. Geralt is afraid of Yennefer, but also loves her incredibly, and their relationship is very complicated, and it shows in the way that he talks about her. So it's an interesting way that they took it in the show. I like it a lot. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, I think it's a good spin. She's also like very neutral when it comes to politics among the mages. Mages are very have kind of dug into and very involved, as they all serve as advisors to the different kings, and they're very involved and almost like basically kind of puppet masters to control the different kingdoms and make them do what they want to do. They're very manipulative people. Again, all mages are assholes. and Yennefer kind of like avoids all that bullshit. Okay, so that takes us to the final character, and arguably the best character, which is Dandelion / Jaskier, the bard, the poet.
Yes.
My boy.
The classic horny bard character.
Yeah.
Horny bard number 12.
Maybe you're going to answer this. Is Jaskier an actual character in the book, or is he just in the show?
Jaskier is Dandelion. It's the same person. Dandelion is actually a mistranslation.
Oh.
Jaskier is the official name of that character. Dandelion was a mistranslation. It was something else, and then when they translated in America, or in English for Americans, it was then retranslated to Dandelion.
Do you think, knowing that the show does timeline jumps, do you think that they would ultimately bring in Dandelion once they settled on like a time?
Jaskier is Dandelion.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's Dandelion. They're just calling him Jaskier.
Okay.
Yeah. That arguably confusing, and if you didn't know that, then that would be weird when you're like, who is this guy and why is he?
There will be a listicle out at some point.
Yep.
Oh, and I'm sure season 2, like episode 1, he's gonna jokingly refer to him as Dandelion, and all the nerds at home will be like, ah!
There will be a nod to it.
Something like, you always pop up just like dandelions or some shit, and then they throw it away and they never hear it again.
Yep, exactly. But every nerd at home will be just, ah!
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. So
The best character.
he is the best character. He's my favorite character. He's your comic relief, right? Dandelion is he's a spoony bard. That's a Final Fantasy 4 reference. His
Who's that for?
It's for me. That one's for Daddy.
Yeah,
there it is.
Daddy. His dick is constantly getting him and Geralt into scrapes. He's usually the reason why Geralt gets into trouble, and Geralt has to get them out of trouble. But he is Geralt's de facto best friend and eternal traveling companion. He isn't always around. It's just like, it's really funny in the series. Like, Dandelion will just kind of show up.
Yep.
It'll be like, oh, Dandelion's here now. And this is another kind of weird like timeline thing with the show, is they're making a linear timeline from something that is inherently modular. So they have to have reasons for Dandelion to like dip in and out.
Yeah.
Whereas like he's a traveling poet. Like he just pieces out every once in a while, and like Geralt will find him drunk at a bar and be like, oh hey, and
Yeah.
whatever.
Watching the show, I definitely like under my breath muttered the words like "fucking bard" more than one time when Jaskier was causing problems.
He is horny bard number 12. Absolutely. So, and I have here, he is the world's first PR manager. Which the reason why, I mean, you might ask, look, why does Geralt even keep this guy around? He's Geralt begrudgingly, loves Dandelion's humor and appreciates him, but also because Dandelion is basically his marketing manager, and Dandelion will go from time to time. I'm just going to keep calling him Dandelion, but if you need to, it's Jaskier in the show. Dandelion will recount all of Geralt's tears, and that's what Dandelion gets out of this, is he is basically chronicling all of Geralt's stories. So what you're reading a lot of the times are Dandelion's recounts of epic adventures with Geralt of Rivia.
That was not an uncommon thing. When there were knights or whatever, a well-known fighter or jouster or whatever would have a hype man bard that would ride in front and just be like, hey, this badass is on his way to town. Are you all ready for this badass to come? Let me tell you about it.
He's kind of like a war correspondent almost.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the main characters. Let's get into some of the different factions. We'll start with the Four Kingdoms. So we've got these series of interconnected but still like, isolated kingdoms. Each one of these kingdoms, each one of these areas kind of is an analog to different places in Europe. So we start with the Four Kingdoms, which are probably the most important. This is where the majority of the show takes place, or majority of the story takes place. If you go on, I sent you a handy little world map.
Yeah, you
which
did.
I was explaining. We'll have this up in the show notes, of course. This is funny in itself because there was a long time where the author refused to actually like stake his claim in a world map. So there's a lot of fan versions of the maps based on like descriptions in the book. Now Netflix has released like an official quote unquote map, but it's really funny that it took a very long time to actually get like an understanding of where all these different places appear to in relation to each other. So we start from the top. Ignore the little mountainous areas for now. We've got the Four Kingdoms, which are Temeria, Redania, Kedwin, and Edirn. And again, that's 80% of the story. The series takes place in these four kingdoms, the majority taking place in either Temeria or Redania. Let's start with Temeria. Temeria is probably the most important of all these. Temeria is ruled by King Foltest. Capital is Vizima, which is an important area in the game. Originally translated as Wyzim. A couple other important points there. We've got the Forest of Brokilon, which is in the show, and then the Battle of Sodden Hill, which is important. And then, of course, we've got the Isle of Thened, which comes into play later in the series. Redania is the second of the four kingdoms that's ruled by King Vizimir, later by Radovid V, who's a major character in Witcher 3. We've got a couple key players here. Sigismund Dijkstra, who is a personal favorite, and Todd's nodding his head. He is fantastic, a really good character in Witcher 3. There's not a lot of notable places in Redania. The biggest one is probably Oxenfurt University, which is where...
Sorry, doesn't Dijkstra get doesn't he have a different? He has a nickname, doesn't he?
He's got a lot of nicknames. He's like head of CIA.
Yeah, because like when he shows up in the third one, spoiler alert, they don't call him Dijkstra until you meet him. Like,
No, he's going by an alias because at the time Redania was when Redania was under martial law.
Yeah, I would agree though. He was an enjoyable character in 3 because like you don't like him, but you also like he's slimy.
He's a lovable piece of shit. Yeah. We're not going to get too much of him until book 1, until Blood of Elves. And then, so Oxenfurt University is an important place within Redania. That's where Dandelion went to school. It's the most notable, the only really mentioned like higher learning. It's a university where smart people go because this is basically the Middle Ages and everyone's a greasy peasant. Okay, and then the two of the four kingdoms are less important. We've got Kedwin, which is ruled by King Henselt, ultimately not important until Witcher 2, the game, and is home to Kaer Morhen, which is the Witcher stronghold, which is the castle where you do the tutorial in Witcher 3.
Oh, okay.
Kaer Morhen comes up in the series too, doesn't it?
It does. That's where they go in Blood of Elves.
Okay.
So that's where we'll be going in season 2.
That's literally as far as I got in Witcher 3. This week after I bought it.
Gotcha. And then finally, we've got Edirn, which is remarkably unimportant as far as the four kingdoms go. Just know right now it's ruled by King Demavend, who is ultimately assassinated. Edirn contains a couple important places. Dol Blathana, which is one of the major ruined capitals of the elves, called the Edge of the World, which is the basis of one of the early stories. Later kind of revamped into a bastion for elven refugees. And then Edirn also includes Vengerberg, which is the birthplace of Yennefer of Vengerberg, and also Rivia, which is not the birthplace of Geralt.
What?
Well, everything is a lie.
Shut it down.
So those are the four kingdoms. We've got, of course, the primary, our main antagonist of the series, the Nilfgaardian Empire, the big bad Imperial Empire.
Which, like, what a nerd name. Like, the Nilfgaardians. Those nerds.
And the racist slur for Nilfgaardians is they call them the Nilfs.
Good. They should be called the Nilfs.
the damn Nilfs. So if the four kingdoms are kind of your, like, Eastern, Western Europe and analog, right, that's like England, Germany, Poland, obvi. In that kind of part of Europe. Nilfgaard Empire is your analog for what I consider to be the Ottoman Empire.
Gotcha.
Which like kind of makes sense when you map it on. So Nilfgaard was once considered to be savage, untamed lands. It was mostly desert, mostly like uninhabitable land, and now has become a very legitimate threat to the northern kingdoms, which otherwise known as the Four Kingdoms. Nilfgaard is now ruled by Emperor Emir var Emreis, who is the owner of that cool metal ass alias that I mentioned earlier. Emir is a cutthroat ruler who is pretty much hell bent on conquering this continent, which is called the continent.
And he's the nerdy white guy with the bowl cut in the show, right?
No, he's not in the show at all.
Oh, okay.
Yet.
Yeah.
We don't know him in the show yet. He appears later in the series, but we don't really see him ever in the books until book 5. We just hear about him, and there are kind of like brief mentions of Nilfgaard and news about Emir. He's kind of this like weird celebrity status.
He's Fire Lord Ozai.
Yes, that's a great comparison that many people don't get.
But they should, because that show's awesome.
I got that one.
Is Nilfgaardian Leviosa anything?
It's nothing.
It's Todd getting kicked out of the call.
All right, well,
that's what it is.
That's for someone out there. I don't know.
All right, so other
Guardians of the Galaxy. All right, I'm done.
Okay. Other less important but still key kingdoms that are at play here. Other major players. We've got Sintra, which most of you who've seen the show know about. Sintra is kind of an analog to southeastern Europe, so maybe like Italy or Greece. Sintra is ruled by Queen Calanth, the lioness of Sintra. home to Ciri, princess and heir of Sintra. Sintra is also, as far as the timeline of the show, is currently allied with the Skellige Isles through Calant's second marriage, which we'll hear about here in a bit. And then, of course, the most important thing that Sintra brings to the table is the fact that they were conquered by Nilfgaard and pretty much raised to hell in what is known as the First Northern War.
Huge bummer.
Yep. Also, if you love geopolitical conversations and just digging real deep into the politics of fake empires, boy oh boy, you'll love the Witcher series.
Yeah. I think you're kind of getting to it now that in the third one there's a whole thing about like two kids that are going to rule and who should rule and all that jazz. Like it's real good shit.
We've got the Skellige Isles, or Skellige, the islands of Skellige, however you want to call it. These are your Vikings. These are your chill Viking bros.
Cool.
They rule. They rule. Yep. They're ruled by Croch on Crate, who just kicks so much ass. Yeah, in Witcher 3. Now, what's funny about Croc is he is a pretty unimportant. He's kind of a minor character in one of the stories that we're going to talk about here in a bit. He's just this kind of like shitty teen who gets real drunk at a party. But the Witcher 3 book was like, what if we made him awesome and made him the ruler of Skellige? So Skellige is actually not very important. They're only kind of mentioned a few times, but they're a main place to go in Witcher 3. So that's why I want to talk about him. Ciri, and it's important to note that Ciri basically grew up here. She kind of considers a lot of like Croc and his family like her cousins, basically. And then two other countries which we probably won't even cover until way later. We've got Kovir and Povis, which are your Scandinavia. So they're kind of like the mountainous regions. They're people that nobody gives a shit about Kovir and Povis. They're way up north. They're just kind of doing their own thing. They're notoriously neutral. They're also super rich they've got a bunch of like gem mines. So the dwarves in the mines made them super rich.
What makes a man turn neutral?
And then you've got Toussaint, which is obviously your France or Brussels analog. They're another neutral territory that won't be important until book 4. But it also is the main setting for the Witcher 3 DLC Blood and Wine. Did you play that one, Todd?
I did not play any of the DLCs, which I think I might even have them all. I don't know. It took me 2 years to beat The Witcher because I kept getting distracted.
I know it's so much. I mean the DLCs are excellent. Toussaint, again, not very important for today's, but people who have played the games have heard of it. Just know that they make a lot of wine and they're protected by forests. Easy.
Cool.
So those are the kingdoms. Let's go through some of the non-kingdom factions. And again, there's a lot of generalities here, but once you understand all the different politics at play, the story goes really, really quick. Just know that these factions are important because, like I said, when it comes to Ciri, everybody wants a piece. Everybody wants Ciri for their own gain, for their own purposes. And that could be to better their own kingdom, to get power for their own people, or to get power for their own faction. So there's all these different factions. So I think the most important non-kingdom related faction are the Witchers, which we talked a little bit about them. We don't really get anything about Witchers other than Geralt in the anthologies. And we get a couple brief things what Geralt recounts, but most of the stuff with the Witchers we don't actually get until Blood of Elves, when Geralt goes home to Kaer Morhen. So I won't spend too much time. There's names like Vesemir, Eskel, Lambert, all the chill Witcher dudes that you hang out with in Witcher 3 when you go back to Kaer Morhen. There's a lot with those guys when Geralt takes Ciri to train at Kaer Morhen, but we won't get into that too much. I did want to touch on the Law of Surprise. The Law of Surprise is really, really crucial to understand what's going on behind the show. The Law of Surprise acts as this world's like gentleman's code, basically. It's something that one enacts or one calls when you save somebody's life. So it's like, remember again, this is a world where everyone's flat broke. So if you save someone's life, what are they going to give you? Pocket change, right? Like these peasants, like they're facing down danger hungry wolves and jackals and terrifying monsters every fucking day. These greasy peasants don't have anything to give, so they use the law of surprise, which it basically states you will be repaid by, or you will pay me what you find at home yet don't expect.
Neat.
So that could be virtually anything. And I think this is a common misconception, is people think this is like basically calling a child or just like asking for a child. What it means is virtually anything. This could be like an unexpected harvest, or it could be like a stray animal that like a goat that finds itself on your farm, right? Again, this is a code between greasy farmers, basically.
And when it comes up in the show, they do kind of spell that out.
Yeah.
Geralt.
Yeah, they do a really good job of that. Yeah.
He's like, I was expecting a goat or something, and it's like, yeah.
He's like, when I made this deal, how could I have known this is what like this would have become or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of that's to understand the law of surprise, is to know, again, this is a gentleman's code exchange between greasy peasants. So of course that could mean an unexpected harvest, or it could mean a firstborn child. And that comes into play. Consider like this gets very much into like the Odyssey or like Greek tragedies, right? Where it's like the soldier off to war who hasn't seen his family in years. Another soldier saves his life. He enacts the law of surprise. The law of surprise is what you don't know, what you find when you get home. What you find when you get home is your wife had a kid, right?
Right.
So that kid then belongs to the man who saved your life. So that is a very common iteration of the law of surprise. That's why most people just kind of gravitate to that, but it doesn't just mean taking your kid.
Huh. Interesting.
Good to know. It doesn't just mean taking your kid.
It doesn't just mean. Now, here's where it
does sometimes mean that.
Here's where it sometimes means this. This is answering Kyle's first question: is how does somebody become a witcher? Well, Kyle.
Well, when a mommy witcher and a daddy witcher love each other very much.
There can't be mommy
Very, very
witchers,
much.
Todd. We already covered this.
They decide to call the stork witcher. No, so the law of surprise is something that witchers historically have called on in order to basically fill their ranks, right? So this is how witchers get more witchers: is they save a greasy peasant from the tentacles of a Kikamora, or the horns of a fucking whatever that metal monster is that we talked about in the last episode. The peasant doesn't have the money to pay them the bounty of thousands of gold. The Witcher says, fine, you can pay me by giving me that which you do not know that you have, or that which you have at home but don't expect, which in that case is a son. And the Witchers do this so that they can basically claim ownership. So they take this firstborn son, and that's how Witchers draft children into their own ranks.
Because witchers are sterile, aren't they?
Yeah.
Witches are sterile.
Yeah.
Yep. So the trial of the grasses, much like sorceresses, which will be important later, witchers are sterile. The trial of the grasses effectively makes all witchers sterile. And we talked a little about the trial of the grasses. That's this grisly ritual that turns boys into witchers. Geralt went through the trial of the grasses. That's what turned Geralt's hair white and his eyes yellow. He wasn't born with white hair and yellow eyes, but that's what made him look like a mutant, basically.
Because all witchers have yellow eyes, don't they?
I think so.
I feel like that was, at least I remember that as a common thing in the third one, where they would reference their yellow eyes or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. He technically has cat eyes, because that's it, like specifically like it's called out that he has cat eyes.
Yeah,
and you can see it if you look in his character models in the games. I'm kind of glad they didn't make Henry Cavill have cat eyes. I think they'll look really silly.
Yeah.
Because they don't really like he like legit has cat eyes in the first two Witcher games.
Yeah, they're
they
really
tone
bad.
it down. It looks really weird. So I'm glad they just kind of moved away from that.
Yeah, I want to make an interesting connection to the show back with the law of surprise thing. There was this line, and I think the first episode of the series, which I only remember because I watched it like 72 hours ago, where Geralt is talking to Roach, and he says like, I kill monsters, I get paid in coin. And it seemed like kind of a throwaway line that he would emphasize he gets paid in coin, because like obviously. But the law of surprise thing makes it seem like more of a, I want coin, not more boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really important to know too. With Geralt hates the law of surprise. He hates all of this shit. Like Geralt, the Witchers are dying out and that's almost by choice. The Witchers hate the things that have been done to them, and these aren't bad guys. Like especially like what you learned in the school, the wolf. They're all like pretty chill,
Yeah, they're
pretty
good. They're good
people.
dudes.
They don't want to hurt people. I mean, they'll do what they have to, but they generally they don't favor. They look at the trial the grasses as kind of like a thing of shame. And specifically in Witcher 3, it's like kind of a big moment. If you know about the history, you do the trial of the grasses, and you don't even do it to like a person. Well, you do it to a person, but they're comatose, and like they all like really struggle with it. Like they all have incredible trauma from this thing that they were forced to do, and and this is like Vesemir is basically Geralt's dad, the person who did this to him, and he's like he lives with the people, the men that he did all this to. Like it's pretty powerful stuff. It's interesting. Yeah. And so just know that they hate it. They kind of like Geralt hates all this shit. He's like I don't give a crap about any of this. Geralt at this point in his life has basically, and he says it in Cavill's character says it in the show, is like I don't need to continue the Witcher line. Like this can die with me, basically.
I also took that line when I watched it, Matt, to also kind of mean like they don't get paid in land or honor or any of that stuff that would like build wealth over time. We get paid in coin, and that's what we live off of, and then
it's cash up front.
And then when we run out, we go and do it again.
They're basically living like drug dealers.
Yeah.
They're living like drug dealing hobos.
Yep.
Okay, so another major faction we've got, the mages. Remember what I said? All mages are assholes. All mages are assholes.
Just in case you forgot. Just remember at all times if you're dealing
the
with
acronym
a mage,
is ummm.
Thanks, Todd.
Ma!
The meatloaf. The meatloaf. All right, good.
Big more cheesy piffs.
That's my contribution to this section.
When I refer to mages, I'm speaking of sorcerers and sorceresses, both. There are other magic users, like traditional fantasy magic users. There are druids. There are sheergans, like healers. Specifically, mages refer to people who wield magic or who channel chaos and turn it into magic, a la sorcerers, aka sorcerers and sorceresses.
Okay, so that kind of answers a question I had. So druids and the other one, the healers, don't...
Sheergans, healers, those are like your clerics.
They don't channel chaos. They use some other form of magic?
Yep.
Okay.
They're more just like scholars, like very realistic versions. They're court healers, or they're town healers, or druids are your traditional like pot smoking. I speak for the trees. Yeah, your Loraxes.
The Lorax is a druid.
Actually, the Lorax
go over my head.
The Lorax is a dryad to be specific.
Okay,
but we'll get there.
A spirit of the forest.
Yeah. Important mages outside of Yennefer, you're definitely your main magic user. We've got Triss Marigold, who I mentioned earlier. She serves as most of the sorceresses serve as advisors to kings. The sorcerers are at the beginning of the show, they're kind of like like every town has a wizard, which is like a town wise man. Sorcerers are just kind of live up in their tower, and they're just kind of dicks to people. Sorceresses are advisors and are like actually politically involved. So a couple important mages. You've got Triss Marigold, who is the advisor to Foltest and Temeria. You've got Philippa Eilhart, who is a big important character in the games and important character in the series. She's the advisor to the King Vesemir of Redania and works alongside Dijkstra. And she is later the leader of the Lodge of Sorceresses, which is a big mover and shaker in the latter half of the series. Other people to note, we've got Fringilla Vigo, who is the advisor to Nilfgaard. Now, she's an important character in the series, who they're kind of painting as one of our big bads, which is really interesting, and we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about my feelings toward how they portray Nilfgaard. And then we've got Vilgefortz, who's the leader of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, and it is our big bad of the series.
He's the big bad of the series?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's not what he is on the TV show yet.
Not at all.
But he does throw knives out of his pocket, which was a fun power.
He gets fucking nailed like a chump, which I think they're they're trying to set that up, but we can
Yeah.
talk about it in a bit.
Quick question. I
yeah.
don't see Mousak on this list, who I feel
he's a druid.
Oh, he's a druid? Okay, cool.
Yep.
Which one?
Yep.
Mousak
is the court mage, acting mage at Sintra.
Okay.
Sintra's whole thing is they didn't want mages to be involved. And they mentioned that in the show. They don't do a good job of explaining what Mousak is, but Mousak is a druid specifically.
Okay. Gotcha.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, and then a couple like areas of note. We've got Thened Island, which is the primary setting for book 2 of the novel series, and then the school at Aretuza, which is the setting of most of Yennefer's backstory in the show. And also another important character. She's not that important. She only appears in one book, but I wanted to mention Tissaia de Vries, who is really important in Yennefer's backstory in the show in episode 2, 3, and 4, and then later at the end, which is the Battle for Sodden Hill, which I am so happy they did the Battle for Sodden Hill. This is a great example of the primary, again, the difference between how the show handles the storytelling and how the books do it. Remember I said, we don't know what happens unless Geralt knows it.
Yeah.
Geralt was never at the Battle for Sodden Hill. Geralt heard about it and then later went to the monument. But the Battle for Sodden Hill is an incredibly important event that we never see.
Interesting.
Until the show came out.
Until they did, and they did a whole episode about it in the show, and that was really cool. It is a famous battle where a bunch of the mages teamed up to stop Nilfgaard, which is again the first Northern War. So after Nilfgaard conquered Sintra, they started marching north, and the mages got together. They teamed up, Ultimate Alliance style, and stopped Nilfgaard at the border.
It was very well done. It was a cool battle.
Yeah,
in the
it was
TV
cool.
Series.
It was very good. I liked it a lot. And we even got some good Triss story that they kind of dovetailed in there, which we'll talk about more about Triss, obviously. And then the last major faction here, we've got the Scoia'tael, and it's specifically Scoia'tael. These are the Elven freedom fighters, who are kind of our antagonist on the front half of the book series. They also appear a little bit in the games. They're basically kind of like elven refugees, and they represent the last kind of like survivors of this elvish population, which is pretty much going extinct. They're basically terrorists. They act as pockets of like bandits, basically. So they attack carts and civilians and people, and are kind of like scattering the soldiers of the northern region. So they're not in themselves, they're not important, but they're a big reason why the North just was not ready for Nilfgaard.
Sure.
All right, so that was a lot. I know that was a lot. That was about an hour in generalities. Any questions on just like generalities, like locations, factions, things like that?
Not yet.
What episode was the Battle for Sodden Hill?
Like the last
one you haven't watched yet.
Okay.
I think it's 7.
Oh, it's not the last one.
No, I think Battle for Sodden Hill is the finale.
Was it the finale? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident in that, yeah.
So I was poking around on that interactive map, Andrew, and apparently Yennefer is about 60 years younger than Geralt.
That is wrong. She appears to be that, but she's actually way older, and they try to subtly imply that the Yennefer backstory in Aretuza takes place many years before anything we see with Geralt in the show.
I mean, it's got like Yennefer is born.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I disagree with that.
And it's 30 years after
yeah.
Geralt is born, birth of Geralt.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. I mean that's a big difference. Like I said, that she doesn't have a birth date in the series. So that's a great example of like they're trying to flesh out Yennefer's character. And that's like where the Netflix show fits in. So we'll talk a little bit about the Netflix show and how it relates to the books. So the Netflix show, like I said, is a retelling of The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, which are both anthologies, a series of short stories intended to introduce the different movers and shakers of this world. The show had the very Herculean task of creating one linear timeline and one cohesive story out of a smattering of different events, because the way that these stories are told in the anthologies are not in chronological order. It's actually Geralt has an encounter with a monster and then is healing up at a hospital, basically in a temple, and is recounting different like his past journeys. So The Last Wish, for example, the first book is kind of like it's like it gives you the present, and then it kind of like Tarantino's it, and it's like Geralt's like, I remember like my first encounter, and I remember my first journey with Dandelion, and this is how I met Yennefer. Like it's all of Geralt's firsts, basically.
Gotcha.
Nice.
So the show had the task of putting that all in one like linear storytelling element or one linear flow without it not covering like 20 years worth of adventures.
Yeah.
And the reason why they did that is the show is specifically trying to build 3 compounding stories. So instead of just seeing it from Geralt's eyes, you're seeing things from Yennefer's eyes and from Ciri's eyes, which is inherently different from the books.
Gotcha.
So that said, the show, only 1/3 of the show is actually true to the books.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Everything that happens in Yennefer's story, so like her like, you know, upbringing, like her being a hunchback and her being taken from Tisea and taken to Aretuza, and that whole thing with Istred, the black sorcerer, and like all that's original canon, original content. None of that happens.
It's made in such a way that it could fall into like the storyline.
Yep, exactly.
The greater Witcher canon.
It's taken from hints that were made later on in the series. So like all the stuff at Aretuza, we don't even hear about Aretuza until book 2, A Time of Contempt. But it took a lot of the stuff that Geralt talks about about Aretuza and inserted it into Yennefer's backstory, which is incredibly smart.
So most of the show is just like really good fanfic.
Yep.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Yep. And
Sick.
and Sapkowski has said it's all canon because he loves the show.
Oh, cool. That's
Good.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
That is
Man, I didn't
refreshing.
know that, and that's my favorite thing I've learned so far.
It's cool, especially because Sapkowski hates the games.
Nice.
And is like been like, games are not a means of storytelling. This is utter schlock. But like he's like, no, like Historic and the Netflix team, like they're fucking killing it. So all right, fine.
I wonder if he always liked the idea of the show and how much extra Netflix paid him to say
Yeah.
the show is good
Yeah.
and I like it.
I'm sure Witcher 3 Wild Hunt being game of the year like 3 years in a row, and
Yeah.
selling millions of copies, and then that turning into a show deal, a Netflix
Probably
TV series,
softened him to that.
softened the blow.
Sure.
Yeah.
How much money do we have to keep shooting out of this cannon into your front lawn before you finally say you like what we're doing?
Exactly. So we'll go through. I want to go through now the first 2 books and then talk about the major stories that come out of that, and then how some of those map onto different episodes of the show. All right. So we'll start with The Last Wish. The Last Wish, which is technically book 1 of the anthology, but it was actually published as published second, which is very confusing.
Good.
Ah, jeez.
Yeah. And then we start with The Witcher, the original, the OG short story, which is our introduction to Geralt of Rivia, badass monster hunter who bows to no man. Geralt enters the city of Vizima, which was then known as Wyzim, so retranslated later to Vizima, which of course is the capital of Temeria, one of the major of the four kingdoms, in response to a bounty posted for a Striga.
Is that the
Striga.
Which one is that? The demon
The
monster?
cursed.
Yeah, the cursed princess.
Yeah.
So this is episode. Yeah, this is the curse. This is
Yeah.
episode 3.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So the town wizard. So Geralt encounters the town wizard Velerad, who tells him that the Striga is actually Foltest's daughter,
There you go.
who was cursed as a baby. Not only that, but it's his daughter born out of an incestuous relationship with Foltest's sister.
Oh,
Sweet.
So it's his
Great.
daughter niece.
icky.
There's a lot of icky stuff that happens here. Again, this is a cynical look at fantasy.
Yeah.
So Foltest then summons Geralt and tells him that he was informed that if someone prevents the Striga from returning to its coffin for the 3rd night in a row, the curse would be lifted. So it's kind of like D&D vampire rules. But he pleads Geralt to, cure the Striga, not kill it. But he says if you have to kill it, if the curse doesn't get lifted, then kill her. Enter Lord Ostrid, who is the town magnate, which I don't know what a town magnate is. I guess just like another like Wiseman dickhead. I don't know.
I think a magnate is more of like a politician. I don't know that
Is it
for
like
sure,
what
but...
a city manager is to a mayor? Is that what this is?
A wealthy and influential person, especially in business.
Yeah.
There it is.
So he's probably loans a lot of money to the king, and
He runs the super
has,
PAC.
and therefore
there
has
you go.
influence.
Yeah. He's a Koch brother.
There it is.
Yeah. There it is. Lord Ostrid tries to bribe Geralt to leave because he wants the Striga alive. And
He's a lobbyist. That's the word I'm
he's a
looking
lobbyist. And remember I said, time after time, Geralt doesn't give a shit about politics. Lord Ostrid is trying to secretly attempt a coup to overthrow King Foltest in favor of Redania's king. And Geralt doesn't give a shit. And instead, he kidnaps Ostrid and ties him up and uses him as bait.
Perfect.
Good.
What an excellent solution. Eat the
Yes.
rich.
Yep, eat the rich. That's Geralt's that's Geralt's platform. Geralt then has a badass fight with the Striga by punching it into submission because he doesn't want to use his silver sword and kill it. So he just has a fist fight with this like werewolf vampire,
And it's awesome.
which is awesome. And then he knocks it out. He takes like a silver chain and wraps it up and just kicks it, and then knocks it out and sleeps in its coffin.
Nice.
That's so metal.
Yeah, it's super metal. He wakes up the next morning to see an unconscious girl lying naked outside of the coffin, freed from her curse. So mission accomplished. But then, and this happens exactly as it happens in the show, he kind of reaches down, and the girl wakes up and slashes his throat because this girl was born in the woods and is still feral and is basically an animal. And so this is the framing device for the rest of the stories in The Last Wish. So this is what the show doesn't do because it kind of can't. Geralt is severely wounded from this battle and is taken to the Temple of Melitel, which is, again, Middle Ages hospital.
Yeah.
Basically, you've got your temple, your healers there, and he's the remaining stories in The Last Wish are him recounting this to the healer. The head of the temple, her name is Nenenke, I think, something like that. She's not important, but she'll come back later. Okay, so let's talk about the TV show then. So how is this different from the show? This is going to be episode 3 of the Geralt timeline. But the major difference is Triss is there. Triss was never there.
Oh, okay.
Triss was never a character at this point. Again, this was the original short story that spawned the entire series. So the only character that really stayed were Geralt and Foltest at this point. None of the other characters in the story even matter. They had to write Triss in. It only makes sense. Triss was known as the court wizard for the court advisor for Foltest. She should have been there. She just wasn't written in yet. So totally tracks. Okay, so another thing that you should know about the anthologies is what Sapkowski did was he took a lot of known fairy tales and fables and kind of turned them on their head and told them, in a dark fantasy setting. So the next story is called Grain of Truth. It's not really important. It's not in the show at all. It's basically just an interesting retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the Beast is a monster that Geralt has to hunt down, and the Beast is revealed to be intelligent, which Geralt doesn't kill intelligent beings. That's something that comes up again and again. Mm-hmm. Geralt learns that the Beast, the titular Beast, there it is again, there's that word, was a thief who tried to steal from this castle, and the enchantress who lived there cursed him to live as a beast. So
nice.
He's got to cure the beast of his curse. All right, now we go to the lesser evil, which you will know as episode 1 of the show. This is the earliest story in the chronology, which makes sense why it was episode 1. This is also more or less Geralt's origin story. This is why Geralt acts the way he does and believes the things that he does.
Cool.
Geralt enters the city of Blaviken looking to cash in on a carcass of a Kikamora, which is shown in that fucking badass opening with Henry Cavill killing that tentacle monster. Unfortunately, as he does in the show, no one takes him up on it. He makes his way then to the town wizard, Stregobor, who is in the show, who is given a more major role.
Sucks.
Sucks.
He sucks so
He
bad.
super sucks because remember rule number 2.
All mages are assholes.
That's right. Stregobor asks Geralt to instead to ignore the Kikamura and get rid of this carcass, and instead kill a girl that he's been hiding from. This girl is said to have the Curse of the Black Sun and has been trying to kill him being Stregobor. So Stregobor's been hiding up in his Tower of Illusions. He's made it look like this like sexy Garden of Eden. He's basically hiding out in this locked tower from this girl Renfri. So Geralt then later meets Renfri at a tavern and her band of 7 miscreants. She confronts him and says that Stregobor is the real villain and offers Geralt the same to kill Stregobor instead, and then says once he does, she'll skip town. And then they bang, of course.
Perfect.
Well,
of course.
Yeah. As one does.
Yep.
As you do when you run into Henry Cavill in a tavern.
Well, who
well,
amongst
so
us?
and Geralt's got a lot of strengths, but Geralt's one weakness is strong women. And Geralt can't say no to a strong woman and is often taken advantage of and easily betrayed by said strong women. So this is a recurring thing, time and time again. Geralt and Dandelion get in more scrapes because of their dicks than anything else.
Good.
So Geralt and Renfri bang. Geralt wakes up and hears from villagers that Renfri is making commotion out in the town. She tells them and that's like, this was all that exposition about the lesser evil. She gives them all this, like, this is your first of your many psychology experiments or philosophy debates about, what is really the lesser evil. He realizes then after hearing this that her plan, that she tricked him, and her plan was to just murder people in the town in order to lure Stregobor out. So he goes back to town and is immediately attacked by one of the dwarves, and lays out all 7 of said dwarves.
That's a neat alliteration there.
Is this a weird odd retelling of Snow White?
It is an odd retelling of Snow White.
Whoa.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
Whoa.
Renfri is Snow White in this story, and the huntsman is Stregobor.
Whoa.
Yep.
That's super interesting.
It's really cool, and they do this, and he does this time and time again, and this is why I love, I think the anthologies themselves are just worth a read, just as isolated stories, because they are, I would say all save for one of them are incredibly cool reads.
Cool.
Yeah. So he fights off the 7 dwarves, and Renfri, as she does in the show, it challenges him to a duel, and they fight. They have a really sexy fight in the middle of the city streets, and he kills her because this is where, again, this is the first we get a lot of information about Geralt's fighting, and this is the first we see Geralt fighting other people. And Geralt is a very adept swordsman. He's a very agile fighter. He can take on a lot of dudes no problem, and he basically easily kills them. Old Stregs comes out and says, and wants to take the body and examine her for that, to understand the curse more. And Geralt refuses because he doesn't really love Renfri, but he has some sort of connection to her, even though he didn't want to kill her. He was defending himself and defending the people.
Yeah.
So Geralt refuses and no, get out of here, you spook. And instead, Stregobor turns the entire town against him and has them throw rocks at him, thereby labeling him, say it with me, the butcher
power of
alive.
friendship. Wait, it
God
wasn't
damn
the
it.
power of friendship. Shit.
Nicely done. So that's Geralt's origin story. That's why Geralt doesn't get involved in the affairs of men. All people are out for their own gain. Everyone's a dick. It's just nothing is black and white.
Everyone will turn on you at the top
everyone
of
will
a
turn
hat.
on you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's really important to understanding his character. And this is your episode 1 of the show. It's pretty much identical. They didn't take a lot of liberties on this one. They needed a reason to bring Stregobor back, so they do bring him back in some of the Aretuza stuff. But again, he just disappears. We won't see him again.
Cool. That's good because he super sucks.
Yeah.
He sucks. He sucks a big old dick. Okay. Next, we have a question of price. So this is episode 4 in the show. We start with Geralt attending a banquet in Sintra. Geralt is seated next to Queen Calanthe, the current ruler of Sintra, the Lioness of Sintra. We're also introduced to a couple other major players at Sintra's court. In addition to Calanthe, we've got Iced Tursich, who is the Jarl of Skellige. A Jarl you may remember from Skyrim as a Viking leader.
Yes.
So he's the guy seated next to Calanthe in the show. He's kind of got like a smug grin on his face all the time.
Gotcha.
That's Iced Tursich.
And that's the one that she marries in the show, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Good memory. We've got Mousak the Druid, who you mentioned. We talked about him. Krach Uncrate, who is in the show very briefly. He's like a 15-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. He's the heir to Skellige Islands after Tursich. And then, most importantly in this story, we've got Pavetta. Pavetta is Calanthe's daughter. Mm. This banquet is Pavetta's engagement ceremony. Pavetta has been has been engaged to Krach Uncrate to combine the families of Skellige and Sintra together, cementing their alliance. And Geralt's there. Geralt was brought in as a bouncer, basically, in case shit goes down. He kind of puts 2 and 2 together. Mm-hmm. But again, we just heard that Geralt doesn't give a shit about the affairs of men. He doesn't want to fight people. He just wants to fight monsters. He doesn't care about any of this crap. So he's just kind of there, like, whatever. And shit goes down.
Because it wasn't going to be a nice ceremony.
Because of course it wasn't going to be a nice ceremony. Like I said, Pavetta is supposed to be wed to Krach, but a mysterious visitor arrives saying he is owed Pavetta by the law of surprise. So he is calling his favor in the law of surprise. He calls himself Dooney, the urchin of Erlenwald. He appears in full plate armor, like a full closed helm, and says that basically he reveals to Queen Calanthe that he saved her late husband's life, and the king promised him
the law of surprise.
He enacted the law of surprise. In this case, was what you do not know, yada yada yada. And Calanthe's like, fuck that, I don't care. My husband was a piece of shit or whatever, was a weakling. Calanthe is very much like, her name is Lioness for a reason. She's very much like she's a loose cannon. And she's the reason why Sintra has kind of isolated themselves, and through her actions, and she has good intentions. She's trying to protect her people, but through her actions, she has allowed Nilfgaard to attack them. The Dooney takes off his helmet and sees he has a hedgehog head.
Yeah,
it's a hedgehog head.
Yep.
Spiky head, weird nose.
Yeah, which is neat. He says he was cursed as a young child, and it just every day he's just a hedgehog. Wake
up in the morning feeling like a hedgehog.
But does he gotta go fast?
I was looking for a way to make that joke.
He gotta go fast, but unfortunately he can't go fast because Calanthe has the guards try to kill him, and he fights off a bunch of guards, and then this whole brawl ensues, and Geralt hops in, and they're just kind of fighting and whatever, and Pavetta stops everything, and she starts screaming and is like, no, like, she reveals that they have a relationship. So she's met Dooney before, and they kiss and they have a relationship, and she says, I want to marry Dooney. So she wants this to happen. Calanthe stops everything and then tries to, and walks up to Dooney and then tries to stab him. And that's when shit goes nuts. So Pavetta screams, and the whole room erupts in this magical energy. And her eyes turn light blue, and there's this powerful wind. And in the show, everyone's blown back to the sides of the edges of the room, while Pavetta and Dooney are suspended in midair. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool image.
It's a really really cool part of the show. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's super neat. Yeah, so this is us introducing. This is our first introduction to the Elder Blood. So, and we'll get more about that, but this is kind of planting the seeds that eventually this power that Ciri has is just uncontrollable and can move mountains basically. Geralt intervenes and is able to calm Pavetta down and saves Dooney's life. Dooney thanks him and asks him what he owes him. And again, this is a really, like, what a great move by Henry Cavill. He delivers this line so well. Geralt responds with the law of surprise, like, as a joke.
Yeah.
Because again, like, Geralt does not believe in any of this shit.
Right.
Like, he is over Destiny, he's over the law of surprise, he's over Witcher, all that stuff. And then it's revealed that Pavetta is muy pregante.
Oh, bummer.
And everyone's like, "Oh fuck."
Wow.
So this is half of episode 4. Biggest difference is Dandelion wasn't there.
Yeah.
He wasn't. They needed a reason for Dandelion to be there because again, linear narrative. So
Yeah, because they gave us toss a coin to your Witcher in episode 3, and they said, how can we bring this back in episode 4?
which brings us to the end of the world, otherwise known as episode 3.
Let's do
What are
it.
you gonna say, Kyle?
Oh, I was just gonna say, they also, I'm fine with them forcing Dandelion into more episodes because the show would be a huge bummer without him otherwise. Because it's pretty heavy.
I totally agree. And it makes Geralt's brashness a little more tolerable.
Yeah,
yeah.
He evens everything out, and
he does.
He
super does.
He's the right, and it's good. He's a very good character to have.
And that's true to his character too, because Geralt gets real fucking emo later in the story. Like, it gets bad. Like when Geralt, because right now we still have like cool, unfeeling Geralt who doesn't give a shit about anybody. But like once we get to the point where Geralt has that connection with Ciri and he's like searching for her and he's trying to find his daughter, basically, he gets super sad and emo. And the only person that can bring him out of those depths is Dandelion, which is cool. It's a cool part of their relationship that, continues.
Yeah, I want to like give credit where credit is due to the Netflix casters too, because everybody who is cast in this is really good. I just had to look. Yaskier is some guy named Joey Beatty who I'd never heard of, but he's really good.
He's excellent.
Just honestly, like, some of the Netflix shows, the casting tends to be what really misses the mark for them, I feel. And I don't feel that way at all about this show.
I think they nailed this.
Yeah, agreed. I think Yennefer is an interesting play, but it makes sense for what they're going for.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So we've got the end of the world. End of the world is kind of boring. There's not a whole lot here. This is our introduction to Dandelion. In the book, this is like, oh, my first adventure with Dandelion. They're looking for Witcher work, and they end up in the sticks, like the far reaches of civilization, middle of nowhere. Because, like I said before, all these cities are popping up, and there are no monsters in the cities. They're all running away. So they have to. So Geralt kind of like has to stick to these real boondocky villages, right? And like the farther out from civilization, the greasier the peasant.
As in the real world.
Exactly. So he sees a bill for hunting a devil, and it's spelled like Devoul or something like that. And a bunch of stuff happens, and it's revealed that the devil is actually a Sylvan, which is an intelligent kind of fey creature. So comparable to like a satyr in Greek mythology.
He's Philatites, aka Danny DeVito. This character is Danny DeVito.
Basically.
Danny DeVito does not appear in the Netflix series The Witcher for anyone who has not watched it yet at home.
Not yet. He hasn't, Kyle.
Not yet.
A recurring theme is Geralt doesn't kill intelligent creatures, so he tries to trick it into leaving, and he kind of succeeds, but is interrupted by a third party. That third party is a band of rebel elves who tie up Geralt and Dandelion. The rebel elves smash Dandelion's loot. They threaten to kill him. But like Geralt kind of like goads them. This is like Geralt's tied up a lot in this series. Like he gets captured a hell of a lot of times, and he always like is able to kind of like navigate his way out of it. Like he's the guy in the D&D party who's constantly doing intimidation checks and always succeeding. he was tied up and rolled a 20 in intimidation, and while he was tied up, he convinced one of the people to like lean in close and then headbutted him. Good. It's like really good. And they kind of get in a little bit of a brawl, and it's interrupted by the mysterious Lady of the Fields, who appeared earlier as a human. Again, it doesn't really matter. She's the one that kind of sent them on this journey. The elves are led by a man named Philandriel, who is in the show. And they talk, they do more philosophy 101 shit, and everyone parts ways. Geralt, there's a line that I wanted to write this in. Phil Evandriel, like they kind of have this like, rivalry kind of relationship, and at least like tenuous relationship. And Geralt's like, hey, you can punch Dandelion in the gut if you want, and he does. Nice. It was really funny. So again, this isn't super important. It's in episode 2. This is our introduction to Dandelion Yaskir. We don't get anything about the Lady of the Field, which is kind of dumb. It's irrelevant. It's just showing the dynamic of Geralt and Dandelion, but it's also showing how Geralt empathizes with the elves, and that's a really kind of interesting underlying theme with the elves. Is they're the displaced natives, right? And everyone sees them as monsters, as terrorists, as savages. Go ahead, Kyle.
I saw this headline before I watched the show, so I wasn't clear on all the details when I read it. There was something about the organization of indigenous people from Iceland commended the show for its portrayal of the elves, basically. Like that's a direct parallel, I guess, to that.
It absolutely is. Yeah,
and they made a point to commend the series or Netflix or something for like this portrayal, and Netflix worked with them to make sure they didn't do anything, out of sorts in regards to that. So
that's cool.
That's a very
That's a pretty big theme to Geralt's character, is he empathizes with the elves time and time again, and so much so that he'll tell other people, be like, because humans are afraid of elves,
right?
Especially because of that faction, the Scoia'tael, because they just attack humans because they hate humans so much, and most people are afraid of them and hate them. And Geralt is one of the few like sympathizers.
Yeah.
So.
This also is the episode where the toss a coin to your Witcher is introduced and gets stuck in your head for the rest of the show.
It lives there now.
It lives there now.
Rent free in our heads.
So goddamn good. All right, and then that brings us to the most important story here, which is The Last Wish, of course. So The Last Wish is our introduction to Yennefer. This is your episode 5. Last Wish is our introduction to Yennefer. So it starts with Geralt and Dandelion are fishing, and Dandelion, as he does, pulls up an old buddies like they are. Dandelion fishes up an old bottle sealed with a magical emblem. Dandelion gets really excited because he recognizes this as containing or could contain a magical genie to grant his 3 wishes. And this is very much an analog to your 40 Arabian Nights. Dandelion is eager to open it, but Geralt tries to stop him. He's unsuccessful. Dandelion cracks it open and quickly spouts off 2 wishes, and it's like he does in the show. It's like, I wish so-and-so is the worst bard or whatever. I wish I could be better than blah. It's like really selfish shit because that's Dandelion.
Of course.
And instead of doing any of those things, the djinn in this world, they're called a djinn or djinn, I think.
Djinn. D's
djinn.
silent.
Yeah. DJINN. Instead of granting any wishes, this red mist comes out of the bottle and starts strangling Dandelion.
Bummer.
So yeah. So whoops. Dandelion's in another scrape again. Geralt is able to quickly grab the seal, and he mutters some sort of some low key incantation, and is able to kind of away, kind of like, what do you call it? Like get the spirit to go away. Dispel the spirit. Yeah. Thank you. But Dandelion's lost his voice in that attack, and he's in pretty bad shape. So Geralt takes Dandelion down to the town to see their local healer. The local healer says he can't do much. He needs help from a mage. And magic, much like the Footloose town and dancing, magic is more or less outlawed here for whatever reason.
They need the Witcher Kevin Bacon to come and teach them the error of their ways.
Kevin of the School of Bacon. Magic is kind of outlawed, but there is a sorceress who's been operating kind of outside of the law on the fringes, and she happens to be holed up in the estate of some rich merchant. But as the healer warns, she is very dangerous. So Geralt says fuck that and makes his way directly to the estate.
Yep.
Because he don't care, and finds everyone is either super asleep, just passed out asleep, or the owner of the mansion is just kind of parading around naked, straight up wasted drunk.
Yes,
As one does.
Which they
As one
kind
does.
of give you something like that in the series.
They super do, yeah.
Yeah, everybody needs a chance to be naked wasted.
Yep.
That's right. And then we're introduced, for the first time, we're introduced to Yennefer of Vengerberg. She's there in all her glory, and Geralt's like, damn, girl, he's mad thirsty. That's what I have in my notes. Damn,
exactly
girl,
what
he
you
mad
have in-
thirsty.
2 Y's, 3 U's, 3
Yep.
R's in damn girl for
Yep.
for everyone keeping score at home. Playing
So
Scrabble.
this is that offhanded remark when Geralt's describing Yennefer. He says something like, she probably had a hunchback or something.
Okay.
And this is where, again, like I've said this a few times now, the book never gives her backstory. This is also where Geralt infers or suggests that she's way older than him, which according to the show is not the case, which, like, fair enough. That's fine. I don't really care.
Is the author of the books, did he consult on the show, or did he just got to
Yes.
give his stamp of approval?
Yes,
Okay.
he was moderately involved.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we can like trust the stuff that when they say it's canon, we can trust he was involved in.
I wouldn't take anything to be here as fan fiction. I would take everything here is legitimate
Okay.
now. So, but again, like, these stories were written never with the intention to have Yennefer as such a major character,
Gotcha.
or at least to play the role that she ends up playing.
Gotcha.
So, okay, what do we got here? Yeah, so Yennefer is not a good person. She's not morally just. She's not loyal. She's very cunning. She's kind of just like having fun. She's basically set up this like eternal recess for herself, right? Like she's got this pleasure palace that she's made, and she's like hypnotized the entire. She's basically terrorizing this town. Like, everyone's terrified of her.
Terrorizing, but with sex.
Yeah, totally. With very scary, very sexy sex.
Putting everyone in horny terror.
Yeah. Horny terror is a very consistent thread when it comes to sorcerers and sorceresses.
Yeah.
She's kind of like toying with Geralt, but he reveals that it was the work of a djinn, and she's like, "Oh, a djinn, you say? Well, I guess I'll do it." So she accepts the request to heal Dandelion. She puts Dandelion to sleep, and then they take a bath.
As one does.
Yeah.
Quote
As
unquote.
one
Take a bath.
does. This is also where we're introduced to lilac and gooseberries. That's Yennefer's signature fragrance. Geralt gets super turned on anytime he smells lilac and gooseberries.
How long until Netflix sells a lilac and gooseberries fragrance? A tie-in
I'm
fragrance.
sure it exists
Gross.
already.
Not long
I'm
enough,
sure it
Kyle.
exists already. There's also the stuffed unicorn. That's a fun nod.
Yeah.
as well.
They bone on a stuffed unicorn.
Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah. They do a lot of weird sex stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Geralt leaves from his bath and goes back to, he's staying at the local tavern. He meets up with that healer again, who reminds him that Yennefer is not to be trusted, which, like, okay, we get it, man. She summons Geralt back to her chamber and brings up the question of price. And is that the name of this story, or is it? I think actually the name is A Question of Price. Sorry, I might mess that up. Doesn't matter. Geralt wants to make sure, before they talk about price, Geralt wants to make sure Dandelion is safe because he's still passed out. He's still in a coma. But she refuses and reveals that he is trapped, and Geralt passes out. So that's where they bring in the lilac and gooseberries. She uses that as a kind of like a charm spell almost. Geralt wakes up in a cell several hours later with 2 thieves, an old man, and the healer before, all staring down at him. The healer explains to Geralt that he was arrested for his rampage throughout the town last night.
Oopsie daisy.
Whoops. Apparently, Geralt went and physically assaulted anyone who had ever given Yennefer problems in the past, going so far as spanking the local apothecary
Nice.
in the middle of the street.
There's that horrifying sexiness we were talking about.
Good old
Right,
horny
exactly.
terror.
Yeah.
The horny terror of Henry Cavill spanking a grown man in the streets.
That's the episode title, The Horny Terror of Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill. Somebody write that down. A guard eventually comes down to taunt Geralt in the cell and just starts beating him straight up. Geralt, as he does, as he's known to do, tries to goad him further by saying something along the lines as he wished the guard would burst, and then the guard's head explodes.
Oh,
Yes.
which is pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So Geralt's about to be taken out to be hung because, he just straight up murdered a dude. And Dandelion appears. This is where it's a little different from the episode recount in the show. Dandelion appears through a portal, just kind of yelling that the Witcher is innocent. So we know that Dandelion's okay. Hooray. And he's yelling, "I'm using the last of my 3 wishes to free Geralt." Like he's exclaiming this. But nothing happens. And the reason why all this is happening is going on is Yennefer is trying to capitalize on Dandelion using his last wish as a way to capture the Djinn. Except she doesn't, and the Djinn appears but starts just wrecking shit all over town. And so this is Yennefer's plan, was she was gonna capture the Djinn as a source of magical energy. She wanted to capture the Djinn to harness it to be the most powerful sorceress. Not a very noble goal. Again,
Nope.
Very selfish ends. Geralt kind of puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that Dandelion was not the master, rather Geralt was. And after realizing that the Djinn is not going away, Geralt recounts the last couple events in his head and realizes that the Djinn was listening to him. Geralt's first wish was that incantation that he spoke to make the Djinn go away. The second wish was blowing up the guard's head. So Geralt jumps through the portal to go rescue Yennefer, and he's going to do so by using his last wish, i.e. the last wish. He does, and he he gets rid of the Djinn. The titular last wish. He gets rid of the Djinn for good, just in the nick of time, and they bang.
As they do.
as one does.
Question: does anybody know what Geralt's wish was?
I don't think. Oh, I know in the show they don't mention it. Like they say they don't say what it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I definitely figured it was like I want my path to continue to intertwine with this person. Because I didn't think it was like I wish for her to love me. I figured it was more of a
No.
I want this person to be a continued plot point in my life.
Well, and we know in the third. Well, again, my context is third Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
Like the penultimate quest with Yennefer is like dispatching that Djinn.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That quest is so good and so satisfying.
Oh, yeah.
I love that quest.
That's like your last chance where you're like, are you choosing Yennefer or are you choosing Triss? And I was like, hell yeah, Yennefer. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's very good.
You fight on like a pirate ship in the sky or something like that.
It's actually beautiful. I love it. I love it so much. So Geralt's wish was for he and Yennefer to be bound together forever.
Oh.
And the reason for that, it was his way of tricking the Djinn into not killing Yennefer, but also kind of going away, because Yennefer is trying to channel the Djinn's power into her. He knew that he couldn't convince Yennefer to stop, and he knew that there wasn't another way to make the Djinn go away and not make Yennefer go after it. So by wishing that they were bound together, it wasn't necessarily, like you said, Matt, it wasn't wishing for her to love him. It was for their fates to be bound.
Right.
Which would, prevent the Djinn from killing her, because the Djinn wasn't going to kill Geralt. It was his master.
Right.
Did they ever explain why the Djinn was mastered by Geralt and not Dandelion or Jaskier?
It's just Geralt was the one who opened the bottle.
Got it.
They're kind of like, it's purposely vague. Like they're kind of fighting over it because they want you to think that Dandelion was.
Yeah.
It could probably be explained by like who actually opened the bottle, like whatever. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
Yeah, it ultimately doesn't. So this is told in episode 5 pretty well. I think the one thing that kind of turned me off, this is such a minor complaint, but in the show, Geralt is purposefully fishing for a Djinn, like for a magic bottle.
They make a
which
reason.
like, I was like, that's unnecessary.
Someone
like,
told
I kind of
me
like it's just
someone told me
Yeah.
a Djinn is in this lake and I'm having trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, okay. And that just...
Well, they really play off like he's grumpy, and like, I'm going to fix my grumpiness by sleeping. And Dandelion's like, no, we're fishing
I
now.
wonder if that's a thread they'll explore later. The, like, why he wasn't sleeping thing, or...
Well, it was their... I'll tell you why. It was their attempt to build to back build all of the Ciri stuff.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, Ciri is not mentioned. Ciri doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Ciri is never mentioned until Sword of Destiny. And that's all the stuff with a lot of surprise, the child surprise. They're trying to backfill that a little bit more to make him feel like guilty. Geralt does do all those things. Like, Geralt spends a lot of time thinking about Ciri and thinking about Sintra, just not yet.
Gotcha.
That's really interesting because, like, when I was watching the show, I assumed it was not Ciri that was keeping him up at night, but it was Renfri. Like, it was some callback of, like, his first love of Renfri and wanting to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind her out of his brain.
It might. I mean, maybe my interpretation, which I don't think they make it. They kind of keep it vague. My interpretation is that was him being guilty for not checking, like, for basically, like, he felt like he abandoned Pavetta's child, which he didn't know at the time.
Cool.
But all right, so that's the last wish.
So, question before we move on, because I think this book, I'm guessing, didn't have any of the stuff about Yennefer wanting the Djinn to return her, to make her not sterile anymore.
Yep, good call out. Yeah, that we don't get into that until Sword of Destiny. She doesn't reveal any of that yet. She just wants the Djinn for great power.
Okay, but it does come out in the next book.
It does.
Okay.
And that we'll take a brief pause here because I do want to talk a little bit more about Yennefer's story in the show. I think this is a good point to do that. So I mentioned already a lot of the show stuff is original
Can we take
content.
a pause? I definitely have
Yeah.
to pee.
Yeah,
Yes.
I also
Me too, and I'm gonna get some water as well. All right, and now we're back. So before the break, we talked about The Last Wish, which is the first of the two anthologies that the series is based on. Now we're gonna cover Sword of Destiny. I want to note that Sword of Destiny chronologically takes place after The Last Wish, but it's kind of weird. It was published first for whatever reason. Because of that, most of the stories in Sword of Destiny actually aren't relevant to the canon. A lot of these are even more isolated than the Last Wish ones. The Last Wish kind of like recontextualized a lot of the Sword of Destiny stuff. That said, I think this is probably my favorite of the books. Even in the novels, I think Sword of Destiny is the best. It just has the most interesting ideas and coolest like explorations of isolated stories. And really, I think what really leads with this book is the first one here called The Bounds of Reason. So this one is in the show. This is episode 5. No, I think it's episode 6.
Episode 5 was just the one with the
Yes.
Djinn.
Sorry, I wrote that wrong. It's episode 6.
Okay.
The Bounds of Reason is another piece that's kind of delving into Geralt's character, why he does what he does, why he believes the things he believes. Geralt meets a charismatic adventurer named Borch 3 Jackdaws. Which
what
is
a good name.
Yeah. Who's accompanied by his bodyguards. These are 2 female Zerrikanian warriors. We don't really know what Zerrikania is at this point. It's the Far East, basically. It's your analog, like it's your Africa or even like Asia analog, basically.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm just saying BTJ. BTJ wants Geralt to join him on his hunting party. And Geralt, or he asks him, like, would you kill a dragon? Like, as a philosophical experiment. Geralt says no, because dragons, 1, are nearly extinct, and 2 are intelligent creatures and are not monsters. They do not attack people. People hunt dragons for their treasure. And BTJ's like, sweet, you're legit. Let's hang out for a while. So they hang out for a while, and they leave town and are quickly stopped at the border of the next town over, where, surprise, Dandelion's there.
Yeah, of course.
Hanging out. Dandelion, as he does, informs Geralt of all the exposition, and he's your traveling poet and exposition hound. And he explains that the local king has been paying travelers to slay a dragon, a green dragon that's been terrorizing the village. So just coincidental that three three jackdaws appeared asking about dragons.
BTJ.
Yeah.
BTJ.
No one's remembering that name.
Oh, I'm remembering 3 jackdaws for the rest of my
Yeah, I
life.
got that part.
Yeah, because 3 jackdaws is the next DJ of the Fallout universe.
Nope.
That's really good. Well done on that.
Thanks.
So all this time they're talking about dragons as though dragons are a myth. Dragons, most people don't believe that dragons exist. Geralt knows they exist, but says that gold dragons specifically are a myth, and that'll be important a little bit later. So they hear this story. This village has been terrorized by this green dragon. The villagers attempted to fight back against this dragon by essentially baiting it to eat a dead sheep that was stuffed with poison and like herbs and all kinds of like magical shit. So this dragon has been like coming back, but I take that back. The dragon was attacking, they poisoned it, and now they want to check and make sure the green dragon is dead. But everyone's too afraid to like go to its den to find it.
Sure.
Geralt thinks this story is weird because dragons don't usually hunt humans. Again, it's the other way around. And he doesn't really want to hunt this dragon, so he says no. We see another hunting party being led by one of the local knights in town. He's also accompanied by some mercenaries calling themselves the Crinfield Reavers, a dwarf named Yarpen Zigrin, and by a sorceress, Yennefer of Vengerberg.
Oh,
Ding.
Geralt now wants to hunt this dragon. Player, yes, I will hunt this dragon, and it is that quick of a turn.
he suddenly has a banner. It says like "Big Dragon Hunting Fan."
Yeah, exactly. All right, so our band of misfits journey on in search of the dragon. Geralt again doesn't really give a shit about the dragon, but he's only concerned about talking to Yennefer. And then this is where the timeline starts to branch off a little bit. So in this story, this is 4 years later from The Last Wish, and they had been living together. And it's implied that they had been living together, and things went pretty much undocumented until, remember I mentioned Season of Storms, that kind of weird like Similarian entry?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where Season of Storms comes in. So Season of Storms chronologically takes place between these two books and recounts Geralt and Yennefer's like 4 years living together.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Again, marginally unexciting. So they continue on in awkward silence. She eventually reveals that she wants to kill the dragon because the dragon's tissue has healing properties that could hopefully cure her infertility. Geralt disagrees with that. I started mentioning, and I think I interrupted myself, in the Netflix show, there is a very graphic scene in episode 2 or 3, I think it's 3, where Yennefer undergoes her transformation, quote unquote. Again, none of that. That's all original content. They're trying to make more of her infertility more of a thing. In the books, the infertility is more of an assumed thing, which is why it makes sense that she's trying to find a cure. Infertility is linked to magic use. So just like with the Witchers, because the Witchers are sterile, sorcerers and sorceresses are also sterile because of their connection to the chaos energy, the magic. In the show, Yennefer undergoes an actual like surgery, like a very grisly surgery to remove her uterus as a way to channel magic.
It's
which
like
is
a straight up like
different.
cervectomy or whatever they call it.
Yeah, it was some like Full Metal Alchemist shit, which I'm like obviously here for, but a little bit different.
It was intense.
It
was
Do
intense.
not watch that scene with your parents.
Mm-mm.
Or like on an airplane
No, sir.
going back
No,
to
sir.
Colorado.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, sir. So again, not super important, but good context for how they're building Yennefer's character. They're making the infertility thing a much bigger focus. Okay, where was I? So they talk about curing her infertility. So they're going along this journey. The journey itself is mostly unremarkable. There's an avalanche that separates Geralt and Yennefer from the rest of the team. At one point, BTJ and the Zerkanians disappear. Geralt saves him and Yennefer, and they eventually catch up with the rest of the group. So they've kind of patched things up, so to speak. At the top of the mountain, they finally encountered the fabled golden dragons. So not only are dragons real, but golden dragons are real. Something until recently they only believed were in fairy tales. One by one, the knights and then the reavers try to like the knight. So the knight that's like leading the party tries to fight the dragon, but he gets owned like real quick. He gets knocked out like a chump. And then the Crinfield Reavers and the knights are fighting each other over who gets to kill the dragon and claim the treasure. Shit kind of like everyone just like explodes into a brawl, and Geralt's like fighting against the Reavers and trying to he's fighting alongside Yarpen and the dwarves. Yennefer then turns on everyone. Turns on Geralt and the dwarves and paralyzes them all with magic, and then has the Reavers tie him and Dandelion up along with the knights and Yarpen. Then the Reavers turn on Yennefer and try to rape her, but the dragon intervenes and burns them all to a crisp. The Crinfield Reavers are not important at all, save for there's one really cool nod in Witcher 2, where, remember I said, like, when the games first came out, they were built or they were created without the need of having any of the context for the stories. But the games constantly reward you with little nods and lore beats for knowing the stories of the books. Gotcha. And one of the coolest inclinations of that is at the beginning of Witcher 2, you are talking to a man who introduces himself as one of the Crinfield Reavers, and he's super nice and easygoing. Is like, oh hey Geralt, yeah, remember me? We know each other. And at the time, Geralt still has his memory loss, so Geralt's like, oh yeah. Well, if you as the player don't know that the Crinfield Reaver guy is bad. Oh, yeah. Because you wouldn't know that from him. You are just like, yeah, cool, I'll believe you. But if you as the player know not to trust him, you can basically opt to know that he's a bad guy and not trust him, and you are rewarded in the form of a quest reward, which is really cool.
Nice.
That's really cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you played all 3 games, Andrew?
I did not finish the first game because you have to click a mouse to swing your sword, and it's the worst.
No.
Yeah, it's really bad. It plays like ass. I played through half of the first game. I played through all of the second game, and obviously the third game.
And had you read any of the books at that point?
I had.
Okay.
Nice.
Continue.
Yeah. We've got that's the little fight with the dragon. The dragon saves Yennefer's life, and she's like, okay, I guess I won't try to kill you now. And it's revealed that the dragon wasn't protecting a treasure, but rather a baby. The golden dragon was protecting the baby of the green dragon, who was poisoned by the villagers. Meanwhile, the villagers of the town arrive to finish the job to kill the dragon once and outright. But Yennefer and Geralt team up to fight them back and chase away their villagers to protect the golden dragon. The dragon introduces himself as Villain Trentimurth, and returns to his human form, i.e. Borch 3 Jackdaws.
Yeah.
I called this so far out when we were watching the show, and I felt so good about it. I felt so good about it.
Borch is such a badass. He says he sees why Geralt and Yennefer are meant for each other, but that nothing will come of their union, which is a pretty rough thing to hear.
Ooh, yeah.
And also that Yennefer will never cure her infidelity.
Bad day for Yennefer.
No, what did I say? Infidelity? Infertility. Jesus. Also, never cure her infidelity. I said here, Borch is still a solid bro, and they fist bump, and he flies away. So this is pretty similar in episode 6, save for the ending. Obviously, it's cut down quite a bit. This is a really long story. It's probably the longest of the 2 books. The biggest difference here is how this falls in the linear timeline. This is not 4 years after The Last Wish. This is just the next episode. So Geralt and Yen go their separate ways after this adventure. They're arguing not because of The Last Wish, but because of the last 4 years. And they go their separate ways after this because of the fallout from the next story instead of what 3 Borch Jackdaws says.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Because in the TV show, he says that they'll never be together and reveals The Last Wish, and Yennefer gets mad about it. Yennefer doesn't know about it. It's important note. So the next couple stories are pretty non-consequential. We've got A Shard of Ice, which is just more information, more color about why Geralt and Yennefer do not work. So after the dragon hunt, they go back, they have reconnected, they go back and try to live together. And they're in this like podunk town. Yennefer is bored of these backwater towns, but this is the only place where Geralt can find work, which is just eerily realistic.
Yeah.
Oh, that hurts. Man, that
Yeah.
feels real bad.
Yeah. Yennefer is plotting some scheme. Again, okay, remember too, everything is told from Geralt's perspective. So Geralt learns about this local wizard Istrad. Yennefer's been seeing him a lot, starts getting jealous, yada yada yada. Geralt eventually agrees to duel Istrad for her love, so they're both
Good.
like in love with Yennefer.
Perfect.
And at this point, Yennefer's like, fuck both of you, and writes a letter to both of them saying that she's leaving. So she's kind of like tricked them into getting in the same place to tell them both that she's leaving, both of them.
Good.
Again, all of this is to illustrate how they aren't willing to change their lives in order to be together. And that's why the end of The Last Wish in Witcher 3 is such a satisfying ending, because the difference is Geralt's character growth. Geralt has done everything he wants to do, and all he wants to do is retire and be with Yennefer. But at this point in his life, he still feels like there's stuff he has to do.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Sure.
That'll make a lot more sense once I play Witcher 3, I'm sure.
Yeah. Obviously, this isn't in the series at all, but Istrad is actually a character. Again, he's the black sorcerer in Yennefer's Aretuza timeline.
Gotcha.
That little story.
Oh, okay.
But he doesn't appear again. So he never goes to Nilfgaard. Like, none of that. That's all. Them just trying to make more one-off characters stand out. Eternal Flame is the introduction of Dudu the Doppler.
Which, when I met him in Witcher 3, I was like, shut up.
Yeah. Again, so this is an interesting one. Dudu is a curious character. So Dopplers is another example of intelligent species that are rare. Most people think they're fables, but most people also want them dead because people are terrified of Dopplers because they can turn into other people. Dopplers are shapeshifters. Dopplers are not monsters, and this is one thing I didn't love from the series. Dopplers are just another race of people, but they use a Doppler. Now, it's not Dudu in the show, but I think there's a part where Cahir, who's in the Nilfgaard army, pays a Doppler to what does he look like, Mousesack, to trick Ciri?
Yeah.
Which, like, none of that happens. That's all original stuff. Like, and that's the Ciri timeline, which we'll talk about. But like that Doppler is shown to be like a monster zombie man. They're not supposed to be like that. It's fine. I get what they're going for. Dudu is just like this like happy-go-lucky, fun-loving kind of clone man, and this is where they meet Dudu. And Dudu is a big part of Witcher 3's main story. All you need to know is Dopplers are incredibly rare. Geralt and Dandelion encounter this Doppler who's dressed up as a dwarven banker. Also, dwarves are the bankers in this world. Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
They go on a fun bank heist and solve a mystery, and they clear the dwarf's name is Dainty Bibervelt. And
That's a
which
real
is
that's a real D&D name generator name.
Yep.
Yeah. And Vim, and we also get Vivaldi, who's the guy that you go. Yeah.
Vim Vivaldi.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
man.
the guy. So if you remember Todd in Witcher 3, when you go to the city and you go to the banker, that's Vim Vivaldi.
What an incredible Las Vegas magician name.
Oh,
Vim
yeah.
Vivaldi.
He was last in every line in elementary school.
And he still holds a grudge about it to this day.
The next story is called A Little Sacrifice. This is another one of my favorite stories in this book. Like some of the earlier ones in Last Wish, this is a retelling of The Little Mermaid. Except that it's a dickhead prince who hires Geralt to convince a siren to give up her fins and trade it in for human legs so that they can be together.
Oh.
Perfect. Yep.
We also are introduced to another one-off character, Essie Davin, who I think is not in the show, is not in the games, but I think they based the blonde bard off of Essie, who eventually falls in love with Geralt.
The blonde bard. Which one was that?
In Witcher 3.
Oh, yeah.
Not
okay,
the show.
never mind.
The one who Dandelion ends up with.
Sure.
Yeah, I think they
Yes.
kind of based her on this character. This story isn't in the series at all. I just think it's a really good read. It's this one made me cry. It's really good. The Sword of Destiny is our probably our second most important story here. We see Geralt enter. Geralt is on his way to Brokilon, the home of the Dryads. Now, you will remember Brokilon from episode 4 of the show, which I've kind of been avoiding talking about Ciri's timeline. For those of you who haven't seen the show, there are 3 distinct timelines we follow Geralt and his story, we follow Yennefer and her story, we follow Ciri and her story, and they all happen intertwined, but halfway through the show it's revealed that these are different timelines. So ships passing in the night. Part of Ciri's timeline starts with the Siege of Sintra, which doesn't actually happen until the end of all these books, until the end of the anthology. And then it follows her in the days after the Siege of Sintra. One of the things that Ciri does in episode 4, while the question of price is happening, or not question of, the question of price is happening. Ciri enters the forest of Brokilon, which is the home of the Dryads, and she does shit with the Dryads. That all happens, but before the Siege of Sintra. So this is the big point of which the show and the books start to diverge.
Gotcha.
Cool.
So we enter. Geralt is outside of Brokilon Forest, which is in the Temerian region. He knows the Dryads. The Dryads are just another race, very similar to what they are in D&D. They speak for the trees. They are the Lorax.
Yep.
And a weird thing about Geralt, again, elves love Geralt because Geralt, they kind of like, Geralt has a name, like Gwynplaine is White Wolf in Elvish. Mm-hmm. And because Geralt is one of the few people who empathizes with elves and other fey creatures kind of like respect him. So Dryads give Geralt safe passage through Brokilon, but normally they will fire shots at anyone who comes close. So they're very protective of their forest. Side note, fun note, for Kyle and Todd, I made a D&D campaign that
I remember
years ago that was based on Brokilon Forest.
Yeah, it felt bad in the end because we did the bad things. We killed some Dryads.
I think you raised the entire forest to the ground, actually.
I just know it went bad in the end. I felt real bad.
Who did that? Was that Ben? That
Chris.
like Ben.
Chris Dela Cruz ignited it into a fireball that blew up the entire forest.
Man,
Sounds right.
You guys and your narrowcasting, it's so much fun to be part of this group.
Yeah, okay,
hey,
we'll move on.
75% of this podcast just enjoyed that reference.
All right, we'll move on. So Geralt finds a couple bodies. Arrows have pierced through these soldiers, and then he finds a soldier from Verdun, which is in the Temeria? It's in the southwest of Temeria region, so right due north of Sintra. This soldier is like kind of holed up by a tree and is bleeding out. He tells Geralt to find the princess. So Geralt does so, and he goes deeper in the forest because again he has safe passage and no one's going to fire on him. He encounters a giant centipede that is like kind of like staring down this young girl. This young girl, none other than Ciri. So this is the first encounter with Geralt and Ciri. Geralt fights the giant centipede, and Ciri walks along with Geralt, and Geralt is going to take her to the leader of the Dryads. Ciri reveals to Geralt that she is Callanth's granddaughter, but Geralt hasn't yet put it together that she is the same child of surprise from the Dunin Pavetta story.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Now, one thing that we don't know yet, Geralt has since been back to Sintra before this Brokilon encounter. We don't know that yet. We're going to learn that in the next story, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So he's heard about Ciri. He's heard about Pavetta's child, but he thinks at this point...
He hasn't put all those pieces together.
He hasn't put all the pieces together because he thinks Pavetta's child was a son. He thinks Pavetta had a son.
Gotcha.
So Ciri explains that she was sent to Verdun to be engaged to a prince. She's about 10 now, so in the same age she is in the series. But on the way there, she ran away into the forest and let her entire escort party get killed. Because here's the thing about Ciri. She's kind of a brat. She's a huge boner at this point. She's
she's a
lived
young
life
princess.
of privilege.
Yeah.
She's a young princess. She's lived a life of privilege. She's never been told no. She's been raised by Callanth, who is shown in the show kind of crazy. Yeah. So Ciri's like kind of a pain in the ass. She's a 10-year-old teenager, or almost teenager at this point, who's just,
a tween.
Who's never been told no. A tween, exactly. So it's kind of funny. You've got Geralt who, doesn't ever give a shit about people, but especially not kids, who's with this 10-year-old girl all of a sudden.
This is basically like any of the latest John Cena comedy, like feel-good children's movies right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The Pacifier starring Vin Diesel.
Yeah. So they make it to the center of the forest, and they talk to the head of the Dryads. The head of the Dryads doesn't want Ciri to leave. She instead wants to make her a Dryad. This is a thing that Dryads do, is they turn other young girls into Dryads. Ciri drinks from the magical water of Brokilon, but is unaffected, which makes most people forget and just like kind of like puts them in a trance and turns them in, starts the Dryad transformation. But nothing happens. So again, this is implying that Ciri has something going on. She's got some sort of, properties that, give her whatever magic plot energy or plot shield. Geralt's an ally of the Dryads. He's able to convince the Dryad leader to let Ciri go, or at least to let her choose if she wants to stay or leave. Now, Ciri, again, one other thing we don't know about Ciri is Ciri knows who Geralt is, but kind of like plays it coy. So Ciri knows that she is who Geralt is, and she knows that she is the child of surprise. And she knows that she is destined to become a Witcher. So she's kind of playing Geralt a little bit at this point. So she says, I'm going to go with Geralt.
Well,
And
does she know that she can't become a Witcher? Is that like a thing? Okay.
It's never really
Sure.
like you can't. It's just kind of. Ciri's also like a tomboy, and she wants to be one of the boys and whatever. So like she's all in for like a life of swashbuckling adventure. So they exit the forest and enter more Verdun soldiers who want to take Ciri with them. Ciri runs away and climbs a tree while Geralt fights them. Geralt is overpowered until Mousesack, our druid from Sintra, arrives to help clear out the soldiers. And the three of them take Ciri back to Sintra.
So a lot of differences from the show.
A lot of differences.
Yeah.
This is really where the show starts to branch out. So a lot of this is because of the story that they want to tell about Ciri. And everything Ciri at this point related is going to be covered in the next short story, which is very, very fragmented. So a lot of the content that they pulled from Ciri's story is actually pulled from Blood of Elves, which is the first of the novel series, which most of that book is told from Ciri's perspective. So Ciri is still kind of like a MacGuffin at this point. So like they did with Yennefer, they took a lot of the things that Ciri recounts and her experiences at the Siege of Sintra. Like the Battle of Sodden Hill, the Siege of Sintra is not something that we see. It's not something that Geralt was there for. Geralt, and I will say this again, Geralt was not in Sintra at the Siege. So that's a change. That was an inherent change that they made. So while Ciri does go to Brokilon, of course, she doesn't go there before this. She doesn't go there after the siege. She goes there before, and that's where she meets Geralt. So at the end of episode 8 of the series, that is the time that is the first time Geralt and Ciri meet. In this original story in the books, they have already met before. So there's a little bit of a relationship there.
Okay.
And the thing with the Doppler is new to the show too, right? Mousesack is not
correct
because it's not Mousesack in the show. It's a Doppler.
Yeah, the Doppler thing that's all new. The Doppler is in that other story, but has nothing to do with the series Escape. All right, so we're gonna end Sword of Destiny with the last story, which is called Something More. And Something More, much like episode 8 of the series, Something More is designed to fill in a lot of the exposition gaps. So this is the first real attempt at branching the the isolated stories to a larger narrative.
Gotcha.
And again, I don't know if that was always the intention, or maybe this was written afterward. I'm not entirely sure. I'd be interested to find that out. But regardless, the story starts just like it does in episode 8. The story starts with Geralt approaching a merchant very late at night, trying to carry. And in this version, he's trying to carry a very heavy cart through like rough ground. I think in the show he's like they tried to tie in the Siege of Sintra, so he's like.
It's like cleaning up bodies.
Collecting dead bodies or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the timeline is still like the Siege of Sintra is happening, but Geralt just doesn't know about it. We, as the audience watching the series, know about it, so they try to tie that in. Regardless, the Geralt warns the merchant to leave. He says he should just abandon his cart. The merchant says he can't. This is like a year's worth of pay here. So monsters appear and Geralt fights them off, protects the merchant, but he's severely wounded in the process. So the merchant asks Geralt what he can offer in turn, and he invokes the law of surprise, again as a joke. Geralt likes to be ironic or whatever. So the merchant puts Geralt in his cart and heads off to find medical help. So much like if you guys remember from the last Swish that when Geralt was injured and taken to the Temple of Melitel, this last story here is another kind of hand wavy framing device to give a bunch of backstory in the form of dreams and hallucinations.
Gotcha.
So it's really cool, but it's also really confusing.
Got it.
And very incredibly vague.
And boy, do we love hand wavy storytelling devices here at Debate This.
Exactly. We're big fans of it. So we get a series of dreams and hallucinations in the form of flashbacks to Geralt's time in Sintra first. So apparently, we find out that Geralt did go to check on Pavetta's child a few years ago when Ciri would have been 6. She's 10 now. Mm-hmm. So this was about 4 years ago. Calanth hid her from Geralt, and which is why Geralt thought that Pavetta had a son. Mousak was there and was like, "Oh yeah, he's over there." And there was like a bunch of boys playing in the streets, and Geralt's like, "Fine." Now, note that Geralt never had any intention of actually like cashing in this favor.
Yeah,
he honestly went to Sintra just to check in to be like, "Hey, is this child even existing? Are they okay? Are they being taken care of? Whatever." Like he felt some level of responsibility, but very vaguely.
If I'm understanding it in the show right, he stops in to basically what you said. Like, I am technically responsible for this child. I am here to make sure you're not doing anything that would put my responsibility at risk. But other than that, I don't care, kind of thing. Like,
yes, but the major difference there, like the intention is the same, Kyle. The major difference is in the book, this was 4 years before the Siege of Sintra. Right. In the series, he's there minutes before.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that's the big episode 8 reveal is that we see the opening of episode 1 is the Siege of Sintra. The middle of episode 8, we find that Geralt was there the whole time.
Oh, okay. I haven't watched it yet, so this is all...
Gotcha.
Spoilers.
I mean, I understood the risk
you knew
coming in.
You knew what you were getting into.
Maybe a little late for a spoiler warning, but, here we are.
Put one at the beginning. We'll recut that.
If you're still listening and haven't watched all the series, then I just commend you for your candor. So we also find out that Pavetta and Dooney were killed at sea. So Calanth raids Ciri as her own. And then that's when Geralt says he never had any intention of actually taking their child from them because he specifically does not believe in destiny. They then talk, and Calanth kind of respects Geralt. Like a lot of people fear Geralt, but also respect Geralt, and a lot of people end up liking him when they get to talk to him. So we kind of see this really interesting relationship between Queen Calanth and Geralt. They kind of are of the same mind, but they're both very different people who are trying to protect what's theirs, yada yada yada. But they start talking about how Geralt became a Witcher. And Calanth surmises that it was also the Law of Surprise and is like, well, that's probably why Geralt doesn't like this, because he was taken from his home and turned into a monster.
Yeah.
So then, again, framing device, Geralt, in his hallucinations, then dreams of his mother, who is revealed to have also been a sorceress that gave him up to the Witchers. Oh. And we get a little bit of a inner monologue. Geralt's like... Geralt has thought a lot about what he would say to his mother. It would probably be something like ask her why and then say something snide just to, again, like the old, like, why did you leave? Whatever. Yeah. There's some feelings of abandonment there.
So there's like some mommy issues going on with him and Yennefer then. Like there's a whole mommy issues thing.
There's a reason why he goes after sorceresses.
All right.
Yeah, that's not coincidental. He's woken up from his dream of his mother by being treated by a sorceress healer who, by no surprise, is revealed to be his mother.
Oh.
So it's a very conveniently, like, he's like, I wonder if I'll ever see her again. He wakes up and there she is.
Oh, no.
But again, they're trying to like kind of wrap a bow around Geralt as a character. So they have this like really interesting story where like Geralt kind of accepts it. And she was like, I couldn't take care of you. So this seemed like to be the best option. He's like, yeah, well, that was kind of shitty, but you saved my life, so I guess we're cool. So more dreams. Geralt is now visiting a monument for the Battle of Sodden Hill. And I should note that the merchant is taking them into the town of Sodden. So we haven't heard, again, this is the first we've ever heard about a battle, but it's kind of a flashback of Geralt looking at this monument. and looking at the names of all the mages who died there. And there's like, you see his inner monologue, and he's kind of like, please don't be her, please don't be her. And he's like holding his breath. He's like hoping to, because at this point he hasn't seen Yennefer in years, and he's hoping that Yennefer isn't on that list of names. And he breathes a sigh of relief when she isn't. You know what name is on there? The last name, Triss Merigold.
Ooh.
Ah.
It's a
And
bummer.
that is the first mention of Triss Merigold in the entire series.
Oh,
Whoa.
interesting.
Okay.
At least as far as the books are concerned. So that's interesting. I thought that was pretty cool when I read that, and that's what refers to the 14th of Sodden Hill refers to.
Oh.
And then we flash back to Geralt, or flash forward. Geralt is still traveling with the merchant. The merchant offers up one of his sons to be a witcher. You threw the law of surprise, and Geralt's like, no, thank you.
No.
We're good. One last dream. Geralt encountering a mass commotion on the other side of the river. This is the Pontar. The Pontar is a big strategic location. It's kind of the river that divides the northern kingdoms from the southern territories. This is revealed to be another flashback. He finds, hey, Dandelion's here. Dandelion's there, everybody.
Yay!
Surprise, everyone.
And then Dandelion, our exposition and lorehound, explains that Nilfgaard attacks Sintra and says that Calanthe, likely Ciri, are all dead. Geralt is saddened because he's too late. So in this flashback, it's a little unconfirmed. It's a little unclear. In this flashback, it's implied that Geralt was heading back to Sintra, but saw all the devastation and realized he was too late. And he was in Sodden. He went back to check on the monument in Sodden Hill. So he's trying to like catch up with Ciri, trying to catch up with Yennefer, and he's like all distraught because the people he loves the most are now or he cares for the most are all disappearing except for Dandelion. And so like that's kind of how we get to where we are right now, which is him on a cart going back to a merchant's house in Sodden. Does that track?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So at this point, the Siege of Sintra has happened. The Battle for Sodden Hill has happened. We don't see either of those two things. We just hear about it in flashbacks. And we end something else with Geralt and the merchant arriving at the merchant's house, where it's revealed that Ciri had been staying for the last 2 days. And she like runs out and gives him a big old hug. And they're like, yay, everything is okay. And she says something about, I'm your destiny. And he says, you're something more than that. And that's like Geralt accepting his destiny, but also in reality, he's accepting fatherhood.
Huh.
Aw.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's that kind of reunion happens in the show, but this is basically episodes 7 and 8. They try to cover the events in these dreams in much greater detail. Of course, we've talked about the Battle of Sodden Hill. We talked about the Siege of Sintra at this point. These are things that Geralt didn't see that we're seeing through those other characters' eyes, which is really cool. Which is a great device for the show. And then the Geralt stuff is obviously different in that he was, 1, never in Sintra during the siege, and 2, he met Ciri before in Brokilon, so she immediately knew him. They kind of did this like, I knew who you were the minute they felt each other's presence in the show, which is like whatever, it's fine.
Sure.
But when they finally do meet, it still feels impactful, and that is the end of Sword of Destiny.
Woo. Cool.
Woo.
Yeah.
That I did not realize that like the 8 episodes lined up so well with the starting books. Like
Yeah.
They really do.
I truly did not get that.
I
Like,
was
the fact that it
not
was almost-
expecting so many episodes to be like
Yeah.
I'm shocked at how close to the chest they played it. Yeah.
I'm so impressed with how they did it, and the liberties that they took make sense.
Yeah.
And weave together a more like cohesive narrative. And I wouldn't be. I mean, this is the canon now. Like this is it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really cool what they've done. So I think this is a good place to stop because it's we're gonna hit the 3-hour mark here soon. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
we are.
But I wanted to end the conversation with just a little open discussion about the show. Again, knowing that all 4 of us have seen it, I wanted to just do a quick did you guys have any other outlying questions? I know like the show was pretty good, but not perfect at telling that cohesive story. So I know there's probably a lot of questions that people have and things that like oh, I didn't really understand what this person was doing or that person. So I'll open the floor.
Most of my issues with the show just come from like the issues I have with anything that it leans very heavily into that like old English like names and places thing where it's just like it's gonna take me at least another rewatch before I know exactly where everything was and who everyone is, because I run into that thing a lot where like a lot of people look the same.
Oh yeah.
I'm catching about half of the names that fly by me, and it just is like, cool. I'm gonna get it again on pass number 2. So that's where I'm at.
And it doesn't help that there are a lot of unimportant people that come and go. Yeah.
I would super agree with what Kyle said. I think that was my biggest criticism, was even having, a surface level awareness of what was going on. As you kind of retold some of these stories, I was like, oh yeah, that did kind of happen, but I didn't really fully focus on everything that was happening, and I need to rewatch it again.
Yeah.
Plus, once you kind of see all the timelines converge and make sense, I think it probably will help to rewatch it and be able to really place where things are happening, because at least for me, I didn't right away figure out that they were 3 different timelines. And then, I don't know how many episodes in, I was like, oh, okay, these aren't all happening at the same time.
They try to subtly hint at it in the middle of episode 4. It's the one where, because they've introduced Full Test as, or maybe episode 3, they introduced Full Test as the guy who hires Geralt as an old king to slay to find the Striga, and then they, in a separate scene in Aretuza, they show a queen with her 2 children and says, "Full Test, stop."
Yeah.
And Full Test is a young child, and that was them trying to subtly hint that Geralt and Yennefer are on separate timelines.
They drop hints while at the same time, I think, purposefully obscure. Like they definitely
intentional.
They definitely want you to like reach that last episode and have it all merge in your brain, just like explodes. But they also drop those hints for the rewatch.
Andrew, quick question. Right before we ended up taking a bathroom break, you said that you wanted to go a little bit more into the backstory of Yennefer, and you never really did. Do you have any quick nuggets that you want to drop on that? Because that is like such a major difference between the show and the books.
That was actually, I did a little bit. That was the surgery, the uterus removing surgery.
Sure.
That's what I was implying.
Gotcha.
But that was the big thing. One last thing I do want to talk about is Nilfgaard, really quick, and the difference between how Nilfgaard is portrayed in the series and Nilfgaard in the books. So in the series, Nilfgaard, I mean, it's clear that Nilfgaard's the big bad. Like, there's no question there. Nilfgaard's the big bad empire who's taken over all the land. Duh, get it. I thought it was an interesting turn where Nilfgaard was shown as almost religious zealots, and specifically through the eyes of 1, Fringilla Vigo, and 2, Cahir. I think it's Cahir. You don't ever say these names out loud, you just read them. Neither of those characters are ever mentioned in the stories. They're mentioned first. Cahir is mentioned in the beginning of book 1, and Fringilla isn't even brought until like after like the second half of the series. And it was interesting that both of them played such a big part in the kind of like the original, what is considered the first Northern War, quote unquote. And I didn't, it's interesting how Nilfgaard is portrayed, because I don't love to think that Nilfgaard is like a bunch of religious zealots, because really they are just an empire. They're just imperialists. Like they're not inherently evil. They're brutal, and they are, pretty cutthroat warlords, but they're not evil religious zealots.
It's just manifest destiny.
That'll be...
They're just trying to get from south to north.
It's manifest destiny.
I wonder if that's trying to make the connection to the Ottoman Empire, which would eventually become, all these Middle Eastern countries right now.
Yeah, I think
if they're just trying to make that a little more obvious to us.
Because the original Nilfgaard Empire acts more like the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Where like when the brief glimpses that we get into Nilfgaard in the books are like, they call the Northerners savages, and they're like, we're teaching them, or we're saving them, right? Like, it's like, and they're actually like, Nilfgaard is revealed to be super rich and wealthy.
Which the Ottoman Empire was.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a very
Exactly.
wealthy, successful empire that we
Exactly.
not we, but yeah,
That doesn't exist. And the other thing is how they portrayed Kahir. You might be surprised to know that Kahir is not the villain of this story.
Weird. I'm definitely surprised to know that as someone who has only watched the TV show.
Not only is Kahir not the villain, Kahir is actually one of the main companions, party members that accompanies Geralt through most of the books.
oh,
Interesting.
Didn't see that coming.
Yes. So I mentioned that Ciri had this. In the beginning of the Blood of Elves, we start to see things from Ciri's perspective, and she begins the Blood of Elves with the Siege of Sintra. So again, we should talk about it because it's in episode 1 and 8. But Ciri doesn't have a lot of memories from the siege because she's traumatized, Avi. But what she does remember is a soldier in black with a winged helmet carrying her away. That soldier is later to be revealed as Kahir, who's later, like as a third act reveal, kind of says that, or we learn that he was actually rescuing Ciri. So he defected from Nilfgaard and empathized with her. And the reason why Ciri is the sole survivor of the Siege of Sintra is basically because of Kahir.
Weird.
huh.
Interesting.
And that is so different than how they're portraying him in the series. They're kind of making Kahir almost the manifest destiny, listen to the prophecy guy that Emir, Emperor Emir is, because that personality of like, you are the one who's destined to lead us all, that's Emperor Emir. So I'm wondering how they're going to weave in Kahir to the Emperor of Nilfgaard. I think that'll be interesting. And then the other is, I mentioned the wizard Vilgefortz earlier. Vilgefortz in the series is portrayed to be this kind of like upstart, young, prodigy sorcerer who, is he was like a guard and then turned into a mage or whatever, and he fights in the battle for Sodden Hill, and he's kind of leading he's leading the revolution or whatever. Vilgefortz is the main villain of this story. He is actually the big bad. And it might just be super early and they haven't gotten there yet. But
Spoilers for season 2 of The Witcher, which has not aired yet.
Vilgefortz is the puppet master behind many of the things that happen in many of the major events that happen in the series. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Vilgefortz. And that is where we'll end today's discussion. I think we'll probably come back, likely doing this in 2 more parts. I think there's an episode talking about the Geralt and Ciri saga, which is Blood of Elves through Lady of the Lake, the 5 books. And then I think it makes sense to maybe we talk about the games, and maybe we talk about the DLC stories, and by that time we'll probably have all played the game, so it'll be more just like sharing experiences or whatever.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to keep doing this. Maybe we'll make this premium content or something here later in the year. We'll see.
Yeah.
I like it.
Once
Cool.
we get a release date for season 2, you'll hear from us again.
That's right. So guys, final thoughts on The Witcher.
Yeah, listening to this and watching it makes me want to play it again. It gives me a reason to pick back up my
Gives me a
Xbox
reason
One
to
that
live.
it gives me a reason to fire back up my Xbox One that isn't the Jackbox party packs.
Yeah. I liked it way more than I thought I would. I honestly went in not really expecting to love the show, because I hadn't read the books or played the games, and I tend not to like high fantasy or medieval like set dramas. It's just not my personal choice in entertainment. But I really, really liked it. I got really hooked, and I am probably going to play The Witcher 3, which is a big step for a not RPG fan. So probably going to play that
and
game.
I would tell you, Matt, aside from some grindy parts, because there's definitely some of that, once you like get a hang of the fighting system and you've made some levels and gotten some decent gear, it is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Like getting circled by a bunch of like warriors and just dispatching them is so much fun.
Yeah. And not to mention the storytelling is A+. It's very good.
Yeah,
Cool.
I went in to the show cold. I knew nothing. I know a little more now, and I'm like Matt. I finished the show, or didn't finish the show. I watched the first few episodes at Andrews while I was in town for Christmas, and I left thinking I will buy The Witcher. And I did, and I've now played the tutorial and have had time to do nothing else because my life is tiresome.
Well, thank you guys. I think we'll call it there. Thank you all, everyone, for listening to yet another one of these massive, massive flavor texts. We appreciate you all letting us toss a proverbial coin into your proverbial
Hey, there
brains.
it is.
Hey, haha. And thanks most of all for listening in and joining us as we kick off season 3 of 2020. Follow along with the arguments on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at DebateThisCast. And you can check out our website at debatethiscast.com. If you like what you hear, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app so more people can hear this ridiculous, ridiculous shit. We will be back next week he looks up the schedule. We will be back next week to talk about gaming mascots.
Yeah,
which
with
will
friends.
Be fun.
Gaming mascots with friends.
With friends.
That's right. David Flam from Left Trigger, Right Trigger, our buddy who we did that goofball Full Metal Bazinga thing with, is going to be back to talk about failed platforming mascots from the 90s. So
Having not been part of that, I'm thrilled to not be part of that continued energy.
we're going to do a little guest quest while Todd is out for a couple weeks on vacation.
Todd,
so.
you're going to Mordor, right?
Man, the number of people in my life that when I tell them I'm going to New Zealand, immediately ask if I'm going to go walk the Lord of the Rings trail, and I have to say no, I'm going for a family wedding like a normal adult.
I like the idea that that's the only thing in New Zealand.
The
The
only
only
thing?
reason you would go there.
That's it.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Until next time, I am Andrew Henderson.
I am Matt. This has been a 3-hour sponsored ad for the word titular. Cole.
I am Todd Bloodsweeger, hardly know her. That's a monster from The Witcher. Thomas.
And I am Kyle. It's been too long a day to come up with a middle name, Harper.
And we're saying in a very exhausted tone, thanks for debating with us. And if you think we're wrong, you can come fight us behind the swing sets, nerds.
Awesome.
Good job, everyone.